I woke up gagging on bile for the 30th day in a row, clutching the porcelain like a lifeline while the vintage pendant burned against my skin. The doctors called it anxiety, but anxiety does not have a temperature. On the train, a stranger stared at my throat with terrifying focus. He did not blink. He simply whispered that I needed to take it off immediately. That was when I realized the anniversary gift was actually a countdown. My name is June Riley, and for the last 42 mornings, my day has begun on the bathroom floor. I did not wake up to the sound of an alarm or the sunlight filtering through the expensive curtains my husband, Ethan, had insisted on buying. I woke up to a violent, lurching sensation in my gut, a biological alarm clock that had no snooze button. I scrambled out of the warmth of the duvet, my feet hitting the hardwood, and barely made it to the master bathroom before my body tried to turn itself inside out. The tile was freezing against my knees. I gripped the porcelain rim with both hands, my knuckles turning white, gasping for air between heaves. There was nothing left in my stomach to expel. Just the bitter, acidic taste of bile and the terrified rhythm of my own heart. I rested my forehead against the cold seat, closing my eyes, waiting for the room to stop spinning. The silence of the apartment was heavy, broken only by my ragged breathing and the hum of the ventilation fan. June? The knock on the door was soft, tentative. Ethan. I'm fine, I managed to choke out, my voice sounding scraped and raw. I reached for a towel to wipe my mouth, my hand trembling so badly I almost dropped it. Just give me a minute. I was not fine. I was 34 years old. I had been healthy my entire life. A corn-fed girl from the Midwest who grew up on casseroles and harsh winters. I had never had allergies. I rarely caught the flu. But since moving to Washington, D.C., and settling into this life with Ethan, I felt like I was slowly dissolving. I stood up, gripping the counter for support. The face in the mirror looked like a stranger's. My skin, usually possessing a healthy flush, was gray and translucent, stretching too tight over cheekbones that were becoming sharper by the day. There were dark bruises of exhaustion beneath my eyes. I turned on the tap, letting the water run cold, and splashed my face, as the water dripped from my chin. My hand instinctively went to my throat. My fingers brushed against the cool, smooth gold of the pendant resting there. It was an automatic gesture now, a nervous tick. The necklace was beautiful, a vintage piece Ethan had given me for our second anniversary exactly 2 months ago. It was an oval locket, heavy and substantial, with delicate floral engravings that seemed to swirl if you looked at them too long. It was the most expensive thing I owned, a symbol of how far I had come from Ohio, and lately, it was the only thing that made me feel anchored to reality. I dried my face and unlocked the door. Ethan was standing in the hallway, already dressed in his charcoal suit, looking impossibly put together. He held a glass of water and 2 pills, the antacids the third doctor had prescribed. "Again?" he asked, his brow furrowing. It was a look of concern, but beneath it, I could see the fatigue. He was tired of this. I was tired of this. "Just a little nausea," I lied, taking the water. "I think I ate too late last night." Ethan watched me swallow the pills. "June, this isn't normal. It has been 6 weeks. You have lost nearly 10 pounds. "I know," I whispered. "My mother called again last night," he said, and the air in the hallway seemed to drop 10 degrees. "She is worried. June, she keeps asking why you won't go to see Dr. Arrington. He is the head of gastroenterology at Hopkins. She can get you in tomorrow." I stiffened. The mere mention of Diane Caldwell made my stomach twist harder than the nausea. "I have seen 5 doctors. Ethan, 5. They all say the same thing. Clean blood work, clean scans. It is stress. It is acid reflux. It is psychosomatic." "They are wrong," Ethan insisted, stepping closer, his hand resting on my shoulder. His touch was warm, but it felt heavy. "Mom just wants to help. She thinks you are being stubborn." "I am not being stubborn. I am being realistic. I cannot take more time off work to be told I need to do yoga and drink chamomile tea. Ethan sighed, dropping his hand. She is just trying to look out for you. You know how she is. I did know how she was. Diane Caldwell was a force of nature, a woman carved from ice and old money. In the 3 years I had known her, she had never once called me by my first name in public. I was always Ethan's wife, or the girl from Ohio. She treated me like a temporary fixture, a stain on the family upholstery that she was waiting to have professionally removed. The idea of submitting myself to a doctor she controlled, a specialist she had handpicked, made my skin crawl. I will be fine, I said, walking past him into the bedroom to get dressed. I just need to get to work. I have a compliance audit at 10 o'clock. I chose a high-collared blouse, something that would hide the hollows of my collarbones, and fastened the necklace over the fabric. I usually wore it against my skin, but today I felt a strange chill I could not shake. As I clasped the chain, I looked at the pendant again. It sat perfectly in the center of my throat. It was the one thing Diane had actually complimented. "Finally," she had said when she saw it. "He buys you something with taste." I grabbed my bag and headed out the door, leaving Ethan standing in the kitchen, looking at his phone, probably texting her. The commute to Arborwell Risk and Benefits was a 40-minute ride on the metro. Usually, I used the time to listen to podcasts or review case files. But lately, I spent the entire journey focusing on not fainting. The train car was crowded, filled with the scent of damp wool and stale coffee. I found a spot near the door and wrapped my arm around the metal pole, closing my eyes. The nausea usually subsided after the morning sickness, but today it was lingering. It felt different. It wasn't just my stomach. It was a heat, a low-grade fever radiating from my chest. I shifted my weight, trying to get comfortable. That was when I felt it. The pendant. It felt warm, not body warm, not the ambient warmth of metal resting against skin. It felt active. It felt like a small, hot coal was pressing against my sternum through the fabric of my blouse. I opened my eyes and pulled the pendant away from my chest. The metal was hot to the touch. I frowned, rubbing my thumb over the engraving. The train's air conditioning was blasting. The car was freezing. Why was the gold so hot? "Excuse me?" I looked up. A woman with a stroller was trying to get past me. I stumbled back to make room, and the motion made the world tilt. My vision swam. Gray spots danced in front of my eyes. I gripped the pole tighter, my knees buckling. Breathe. June. Just breathe. I focused on a point across the car to steady myself. My eyes landed on a man sitting 3 seats away. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, wearing a suit that looked expensive but decades out of date. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't reading a newspaper. He was looking at me. Specifically, he was staring at my throat. His gaze was intense, unblinking, and devoid of any social politeness. It wasn't a leer. It was a clinical examination. He looked at the necklace, then up at my eyes, then back at the necklace. His expression was a mixture of horror and recognition. I pulled my coat collar tighter, covering the pendant. The heat against my chest seemed to pulse, matching the frantic rhythm of my heart. Why was he looking at me like that? Like he was witnessing a crime in progress? The train screeched to a halt at my stop. The doors hissed open. I practically fell out onto the platform, gasping for the cooler air of the station. I didn't look back. I joined the herd of commuters and marched up the escalator, my hand clutching the bag against my chest, protecting the very thing that felt like it was burning me. By the time I reached my office, the sensation had faded. The necklace was cool again. Just metal. Just gold. I sat at my desk, staring at my reflection in the dark computer monitor. "You are losing it." "June," I told myself. "The doctors are right. It is stress. You are hallucinating heat in inanimate objects." My colleague, Sarah, walked by my cubicle. She paused, her smile polite, but her eyes scanning my face with that pitying look I had grown to hate. "Morning, June," she chirped. Did you do something different with your hair?" It was code for, You look like a corpse. Just didn't sleep well, I said, forcing a smile. Right. Well, we have that meeting with the auditors in 15 minutes. Do you want a coffee? Or tea? Maybe some ginger tea? I am fine. Sarah, thank you. She lingered for a second too long, her gaze flicking to my neck. That necklace really is stunning, though Ethan has such a good eye. Yes, I said, touching it. He does. The day passed in a blur of spreadsheets and nausea waves. Every time I felt sick, I checked the necklace. It felt normal, cool, inert. I started to convince myself I had imagined the heat on the train. It was just body temperature fluctuation. It was the hot flash of a panic attack. I left work at 6 o'clock, exhausted. The walk to the apartment felt like a marathon. When I got home, the apartment was dark. Ethan wasn't back from the firm yet. I went straight to the bedroom and stripped off my work clothes. I put on my pajamas, an oversized t-shirt and soft shorts. I reached up to unclasp the necklace, to give my neck a break, but my hands stopped. Ethan had been so hurt the one time I took it off. It was a week after he gave it to me. I had taken it off to shower, and I left it on the vanity. When I came out, he was holding it, looking at me with sad, puppy dog eyes. You don't like it, he had said. I love it, I assured him. I just didn't want to get soap on it. It is vintage gold. June. It can handle water. It is meant to be worn. I want you to wear it. It makes me feel like I'm protecting you, even when I am not there. It was sweet, a little possessive, maybe, but sweet. And given how distant he had been before the anniversary, how strained things had been with the pressure from Diane, I didn't want to rock the boat. I promised him I wouldn't take it off, so I left it on. I let it settle against my skin, the chain familiar and constant. I went to the kitchen to make toast, the only thing I could stomach. As I waited for the bread to brown, I heard the front door open. Ethan was home. I was about to call out to him, to say hello, when I heard his phone ring. He must have answered it immediately, right there in the entryway. Hi, Mom? I froze. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the apartment was quiet, and his voice carried down the hallway. No, I just walked in, Ethan said. His tone was hushed, guarded. Yes, I know. I am trying. I stood still, the smell of toasting bread filling the air. She is stubborn. Mom, I told you that. She won't go to Arrington. A pause. Diane was speaking on the other end. I could imagine her sharp, imperious tone. Then Ethan spoke again, and this time, his voice dropped to a whisper. She is still wearing it? Yes, of course. My heart hammered against my ribs. She is still wearing it? Why would Diane ask that? Why would she care if I was wearing a gift Ethan gave me? Unless she thought it was tacky. Unless she wanted it back. Yes, Ethan said, sounding agitated now. Every day, even to sleep. She never takes it off. I stopped breathing. I had never told Diane I wore it to sleep. I barely spoke to Diane. We saw her for Sunday brunch once a month, a torture session where I sat silently while she critiqued my outfit and Ethan's career choices. The subject of my sleeping habits had never come up. How did she know? I know, Ethan said, his voice straining. Look, I have to go. She is in the kitchen. I can hear the toaster. He hung up. I moved quickly, pulling a plate from the cupboard, making noise, pretending I had just started moving. When Ethan walked into the kitchen a moment later, I was buttering the toast, my back to him. Hey, he said, loosening his tie. He sounded normal, perfectly, terrifyingly normal. Smells good. Is that dinner? I turned around, forcing a smile that felt like it was going to crack my face. Just a snack. My stomach is still acting up. Ethan walked over and kissed me on the forehead. His lips were dry. I am sorry, babe. You really should call Arrington tomorrow. Just for me? Please? I looked at him. I looked at the man I had married 3 years ago. He had blue eyes that usually made me feel safe. Tonight, they just looked opaque. I will think about it, I said. Good. He smiled, looking relieved. His eyes dropped to my neck. He reached out and brushed his thumb over the pendant, a gesture that used to feel affectionate but now made me want to flinch. I love seeing you wear this. It really suits you. Thanks, I whispered. That night, lying in bed, the darkness of the room felt suffocating. Ethan was asleep beside me, his breathing deep and even. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling. My hand crept up to my throat. I wrapped my fingers around the pendant. It wasn't hot now. It was cold. Ice cold. She is still wearing it? The question looped in my mind. It wasn't a question about fashion. It sounded like a status check. It sounded like, is it still working? I squeezed the metal until the edges dug into my palm. I wanted to rip it off. I wanted to throw it across the room and scream at Ethan to tell me what he and his mother were really talking about. But I couldn't. If I took it off, and they were watching, if they were checking, what would happen then? I felt a fresh wave of nausea roll over me. But I swallowed it down. I was afraid to move. I was afraid to sleep. I closed my eyes, clutching the pendant like a talisman, or perhaps a grenade. Please, I whispered into the dark, my voice barely audible over the hum of the city outside. Please let tomorrow be different. But as the metal warmed against my palm, absorbing the heat of my fear, I had a terrible feeling that tomorrow would be exactly the same, or worse. The following morning, the Red Line train was screaming as it rounded the curve into the tunnel, the metal wheels shrieking against the track in a way that vibrated right through the soles of my shoes and into my teeth. The air inside the car was thick and recycled, smelling of wet wool, cheap coffee, and the distinct, metallic tang of ozone. I stood near the doors, my shoulder wedged against the partition. Trying to keep my center of gravity low, the nausea was back, and it was not waiting for an invitation. It started differently today. Usually, it was a slow churn in the stomach, but this morning it felt like a tide rising in my throat, hot and insistent. I swallowed hard, focusing on the advertisement above the window opposite me. It was a poster for a personal injury lawyer, his smile too wide, his teeth too white. Have you been injured? The poster asked. I squeezed my eyes shut. Yes. I thought, I just do not know how yet. I gripped the silver pole with my right hand. My palm was damp. The train lurched violently as it slowed for a signal delay, and 3 commuters stumbled into me. A businessman in a tan raincoat mumbled a half-hearted apology without looking up from his phone. I barely nodded. I was concentrating all my energy on not vomiting on his Italian leather shoes. The heat at my throat was back, too. It was sharper this time. Yesterday, I had convinced myself it was a hot flash, a somatic response to stress, or perhaps just the friction of the metal against my skin. Today, it felt specific. It felt like a warning. The gold pendant, usually a comforting weight, felt like it was humming, a low-frequency vibration that buzzed against my collarbone. I wanted to reach up and pull it away from my skin, to create a pocket of air between the metal and my flesh, but my arms felt heavy, leaden. That was when I felt eyes on me. It is a specific instinct, honed by years of living in cities. You know when someone is looking at you. You can feel the weight of their gaze on the side of your face. I assumed it was just another commuter bored out of their mind, scanning the car for entertainment. I opened my eyes and turned my head slightly to the left. He was standing less than 2 feet away. He was an older man, perhaps in his late 60s or early 70s, but he stood with a rigid, vertical posture that defied the swaying of the train. He was dressed in a dark wool coat that looked impeccably tailored but decades out of style, the kind of heavy quality fabric they stopped making in the 90s. He wore a scarf tucked neatly into the collar, and his gray hair was combed back severely from a high, intelligent forehead. He was not looking at my face. He was not looking at my body in the way men usually did on the subway. He was staring directly at the hollow of my throat. His eyes were a pale, watery blue, magnified slightly by wire-rimmed glasses. They were locked onto the pendant with a terrifying intensity. He looked like a bird of prey that had just spotted a field mouse in high grass. He did not blink. He did not look away when I caught him. He just kept staring. His lips pressed together in a thin, grim line. I felt a spike of adrenaline cut through the nausea. I shifted my stance, turning my body away from him, pulling the lapels of my coat tighter together to shield the necklace from view. He took a step closer. The train was crowded. We were shoulder to shoulder with strangers, a wall of bodies buffering us, yet the space between me and this man felt suddenly, dangerously intimate. "Excuse me," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. I wanted to sound authoritative, like the compliance officer I was, but I sounded scared. He did not apologize. He did not back down. He raised his eyes to meet mine, and the expression on his face stopped the breath in my lungs. It was not aggression. It was not lust. It was recognition, and beneath the recognition, there was a profound, urgent pity. "You need to be careful," he said. His voice was low, a dry rasp that carried under the rumble of the tracks. It sounded like paper sliding over stone. I looked around for help, but the other passengers were in their own worlds. A teenager with headphones was bobbing his head. A woman was applying mascara in a compact mirror. We were surrounded by people, yet we were completely alone. "I am fine," I said, clutching my bag tighter. "Please back up." He ignored the request. His gaze dropped back to my chest, piercing through the wool of my coat, as if he could see the gold burning underneath. "It's running hot today, isn't it?" he asked. The question hit me like a physical blow. I froze. How could he know that? There was no visible sign. My skin was not red. The metal was not glowing. It was a sensation entirely internal to me, a secret misery I had shared with no one. "I do not know what you are talking about," I lied, but my voice wavered. "The heat," he clarified, his tone clinical, detached. "It fluctuates. It depends on the ambient temperature, your heart rate, and the duration of contact. But it is running hot this morning. I can see the way you are holding your breath." I took a step back, bumping into the businessman behind me. "Leave me alone." "My name is Silas Mercer," the man said. He did not offer his hand. He kept his arms by his sides, his hands encased in black leather gloves. "I am a jeweler. I have been an antiquarian in this city for 40 years. I know gold. I know silver, and I know when something is wrong with the setting." "There is nothing wrong with it," I snapped, defensive anger rising up to mask the fear. My hand went instinctively to the pendant, covering it protectively. "My husband gave me this. It is vintage." Silas Mercer's eyes narrowed slightly behind his lenses. He watched my hand cover the metal, and a flicker of pain crossed his face, as if he were watching someone touch a hot stove. "Take it off," he whispered. The command was so sudden, so absolute, that I almost obeyed. It was not a suggestion. "What?" "Take it off," he repeated, louder this time. "Right now. Here, put it in your pocket. Put it in your bag. Just get it off your skin." "You are crazy," I hissed, looking towards the doors, praying for the station announcement. We were in the long, dark stretch between DuPont Circle and Farragut North. The tunnel lights flickered past the windows like strobe lights. "I am not crazy. Mrs. Riley," he said. He knew my name. The blood drained from my face so fast I felt dizzy. "How do you know who I am?" "I do not know you," Silas said, stepping closer again, invading my personal space until I could smell the scent of old paper and peppermint on his breath. "But I know that necklace. I know the maker, and I know that what you are wearing is not jewelry." He raised one gloved hand and pointed a shaking finger at my chest. "Look at the edge," he said. "The right side, just under the hinge of the locket." "I am not looking at anything," I said, my voice rising. People were starting to glance at us now. The businessman shifted away. The teenager took off one headphone. "Look at it," Silas insisted. "You think it is a seamless cast. It is not. There is a hairline fracture in the design, a break in the filigree pattern. It is not a flaw in the gold. It is a ventilation port. I stared at him. The words made no sense. Ventilation port? We were talking about a necklace, not an engine. You are scaring me, I said. Please stop. I am trying to save you, he said, and for the first time, his voice cracked with emotion. I saw you yesterday. I saw you almost faint. I saw the pallor of your skin. I recognized the symptoms before I recognized the piece. But today I got a good look at the engraving. The train began to decelerate. The announcement chime dinged. Next stop, Farragut North. Silas seemed to realize he was running out of time. The urgency in his posture ramped up. He reached into his coat pocket. I flinched, thinking he was reaching for a weapon, but he pulled out a small, cream-colored business card. He did not hand it to me. He pressed it into the hand I had clenched around the strap of my bag. That is not decoration, he said, his eyes locking onto mine, demanding I listen. That is a mechanism. It is a delivery system. And it is active. The doors hissed open. The rush of cool station air hit us, bringing the noise of the platform, the chatter of tourists, the announcements, the chaos of the morning rush. People began to surge around us, a river of commuters flowing towards the escalators. I stood rooted to the spot, the card biting into my palm. Silas stepped back onto the platform. He turned to look at me one last time from the other side of the doors. He looked sad. He looked like a man who had seen this happen 100 times before and had never been able to stop it. If you keep wearing it, you will keep getting sicker, he said. He did not shout, but his voice cut through the noise of the crowd perfectly. If you value your life, do not sleep in it again. Then he turned and vanished into the gray swell of coats and suits. The doors chimed. Step back to allow the doors to close. I stumbled off the train at the last second, narrowly avoiding being trapped. I landed on the platform, my knees shaking so hard I thought they would give way. I walked over to a concrete pillar and leaned against it. Gasping for air, the station was indifferent. Hundreds of people walked past me. A woman dropped a coffee cup and cursed. A man ran for the closing doors. No one noticed the woman in the beige coat leaning against the pillar, looking like she had just seen a ghost. I looked down at my hand. The card was heavy stock, textured. It read, Silas Mercer, Fine Antiquities and Restoration, 1408 O Street Northwest. There was a phone number, nothing else. I slowly raised my other hand to my throat. My fingers trembled as they brushed the gold. Silas's words echoed in my head. That is a mechanism. I traced the edge of the pendant, the spot he had pointed to. I had touched this necklace 1,000 times in the last 2 months. I had run my fingers over it while reading, while watching TV, while trying to fall asleep. I thought I knew every groove, every scratch, every detail of the engraving, but this time I felt it, on the right side, hidden cunningly within the swirl of a flower stem. There was a break. It was microscopic. If you were not looking for it, you would think it was just a dent in the soft gold. But as I ran my nail over it, it caught. It was a straight, manufactured line, a seam. It was not a solid piece of gold. It was a container, and it was warm. The fear that washed over me was cold and absolute. It was not the vague anxiety of the last few weeks. It was the sharp, primal terror of realizing you are trapped in a cage with a predator you cannot see. Don't sleep in it again. The memory of Ethan's voice from the night before crashed into me. She is still wearing it? Yes, of course. He had not been talking about fashion. He had been confirming compliance. I pulled the necklace away from my skin, letting it rest on top of my blouse. The relief was instantaneous, physically and psychologically, but the weight of it around my neck was suddenly unbearable. It felt like a noose. I looked at the card again. Silas Mercer. I pushed off the pillar and joined the crowd moving toward the exit, but I did not walk with my usual hurried pace. I walked like someone carrying a bomb. I needed to get to work. I needed to act normal. I needed to pretend that a stranger on a train had not just unraveled my entire life in 3 minutes. But as I rode the escalator up toward the daylight, watching the gray patch of sky widen above me, I knew that normal was gone. Normal had ended the moment Silas Mercer looked at my throat and told me the truth. I was not sick. I was being hunted. I met Mara Keene for lunch at a crowded salad place halfway between my office and the clinic where she worked as a triage nurse. Mara had been my best friend since our freshman year of college, the kind of friend who knew my social security number by heart and could tell I was lying just by looking at the tension in my jaw. She did not do politeness. She did not do vague reassurances. She dealt in blood pressure readings, white blood cell counts, and cold, hard facts. I had barely sat down before she reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. Her fingers were cool and professional, finding my pulse instantly. "You look like hell." "June," she said, checking her watch. "And do not tell me it is the lighting. Your skin is gray, literally gray." I pulled my hand back, tucking it into my lap. "I am fine, Mara. Just tired." "Bullshit," she said, stabbing a fork into her kale. "I have seen corpses with better color. Tell me exactly what is happening. No editing." I told her. I told her about the last 6 weeks. I told her about the morning sickness that lasted all day, the metallic taste in my mouth that toothpaste could not scrub away, the shaking hands that made typing a struggle. I told her about the 5 doctors, the clean scans, and the way everyone kept using the word anxiety like it was a catch-all diagnosis for a woman we do not want to deal with. I did not tell her about Silas Mercer. Not yet. That felt too crazy. Too fragile to say out loud in a brightly lit restaurant with pop music playing overhead. Mara listened without interrupting, her eyes narrowing as I listed the symptoms. She stopped eating. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms over her chest. "It is not a virus," she stated flatly. "Viral loads do not sustain like this without a fever or a change in white count. And it is not stress. Stress can give you an ulcer, June, but it does not make your hair thin out." She reached out and touched the ends of my hair. "I can see the breakage from here." "So what is it?" I asked, my voice small. "It sounds like environmental exposure," Mara said. Her tone was clinical, stripping the fear out of the words and leaving only the problem to be solved. "Carbon monoxide? Mold? Is there a gas leak in the apartment?" "Ethan is fine," I said. "He sleeps in the same bed. He eats the same food. If it were the apartment, he would be sick too." Mara drummed her fingers on the table. "Okay, so it is specific to you. Something you are ingesting, or touching, or breathing that he is not. New medication?" "Just the antacids." "New cosmetics? Lotion? Perfume?" "No, same stuff I've used for years." Mara's eyes dropped to my neck. She looked at the pendant. "What about the jewelry? Is that nickel? Some people develop allergies late in life." "It is gold," I said, my hand flying up to cover it. The memory of the heat on the train flashed through my mind. "That isn't decoration. That is a mechanism." "High carat." "Vintage. Gold can have impurities." Mara shrugged. "Zinc, copper. If your immune system is compromised, even a trace amount could trigger a reaction. Contact dermatitis usually presents as a rash, though not systemic failure." She sighed, shaking her head. "June, you need a toxicology screen, not a standard blood panel, a full heavy metals and toxins sweep. The doctors you are seeing are looking for diseases. They are not looking for poisoning." The word hung in the air between us. Poisoning. "You think I am being poisoned?" I whispered. "I think you are being exposed to something toxic," Mara corrected. "Whether it is accidental or environmental. Look, just promise me you will get a second opinion, a real one. Come to my clinic. I can slip you in with Dr. Evans. He is suspicious of everything. He will run the tests the fancy specialists ignore." I nodded, promising her I would, but my mind was reeling. Mara was a creature of science, and she had arrived at the same conclusion as the stranger on the train, just via a different road. Silas saw a mechanism, Mara saw symptoms, but they both saw something external, something that was being done to me. That evening, the apartment felt different. The air seemed thinner, harder to breathe. Ethan was working late, a common occurrence recently, so I had the space to myself. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching surfaces, wondering if the walls were leaking gas, if the water was tainted, but Mara's logic kept hitting a wall. Ethan was fine. It had to be me. It had to be something only I touched. I went into the bedroom and stood in front of the vanity mirror. I looked at the necklace. It sat there, innocent and golden, gleaming under the recessed lights. "Take it off," Silas had said. "If you value your life, do not sleep in it again." My hands were shaking as I reached behind my neck. The clasp was small and fiddly. Usually, Ethan helped me with it, his fingers brushing my skin, a moment of intimacy that I used to cherish. Now, the memory of his touch made my stomach turn. I found the latch. I pressed the tiny lever. The chain fell away. The moment the metal left my skin, I expected something dramatic, a thunderclap, a sudden rush of health. But there was only the quiet clink of the pendant hitting the glass top of the vanity. I stared at it. It looked so harmless, just a piece of jewelry, a romantic gesture. I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. Was I losing my mind? Was I letting a paranoid old man and a cynical nurse ruin the one good thing in my marriage? But then I remembered the heat, the unnatural, burning heat on the train. I picked up the necklace by the chain, avoiding the pendant itself. I opened the top drawer of my dresser, the one where I kept my socks and unmatched earrings, and lowered the necklace into the back corner, burying it beneath a pile of winter wool. I closed the drawer. I felt naked. My neck felt exposed, vulnerable. I kept reaching up to touch a weight that was not there. I went to bed early, curling up on my side of the mattress. When Ethan came home 2 hours later, I feigned sleep. I felt the mattress dip as he sat down to take off his shoes. I held my breath, terrified he would reach out and touch my neck in the dark. Terrified he would notice the absence of the gold, but he didn't. He just sighed, a long, weary sound, and went to the bathroom. I fell asleep listening to the water running, wondering if he was washing his hands or washing something else away. I woke up the next morning, and for the first time in 42 days, I did not run to the bathroom. The nausea was still there, lurking in the background like a distant static. But the volume had been turned down. The violent, clawing urgency was gone. I lay still, blinking at the ceiling, assessing my body. My head still throbbed, and my limbs felt heavy, like I was wading through water. But my stomach was stable. I sat up slowly, no dizziness, no black spots dancing in my vision. It was working. The realization was not a relief. It was a horror. If taking the necklace off made me feel better, then the necklace was the cause. Silas was right. The mechanism was real. And if the mechanism was real, then someone had given it to me. Ethan. I heard the shower turn off in the master bathroom. Ethan would be out in 5 minutes. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. If he saw me without it, he would ask why. He would ask where it was. And if I told him I took it off because a stranger said it was killing me, he would look at me with that pitying, condescending expression and call his mother immediately. "See, Mom? She is paranoid. She is unstable." I could not let him know, not until I knew what it was, not until I had proof. I scrambled out of bed, my legs tangling in the sheets. I ran to the dresser and ripped open the drawer. I dug through the wool socks until my fingers found the cold metal chain. I hesitated. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to drop it, to throw it out the window, to run. Holding it felt like holding a live scorpion. Put it on, I told myself. Just for now. Just until he leaves for work. I fastened the clasp with trembling fingers. The moment the pendant settled against the hollow of my throat, I felt a phantom warmth, psychosomatic or real. I could not tell. I grabbed a high-necked sweater from the closet and pulled it on, hiding the gold from view. When Ethan walked into the bedroom, toweling off his hair, I was making the bed. "Morning," he said, sounding cheerful. "You are up early." "I slept a little better," I said, my voice tight. "That is great, babe," he said, walking over to kiss my cheek. He smelled of mint and expensive soap. "Maybe the new meds are finally kicking in." "Maybe," I said. I wore the necklace all day. I was afraid to take it off at work, afraid I would lose it or someone would see it. By 2 in the afternoon, the nausea was creeping back, steadily rising. By the time I got home, I was exhausted, but I did not take it off that night. I was too scared. I had convinced myself that one night of relief was a fluke, a coincidence. I needed to be sure, or maybe I was just paralyzed by the implications of being right. The second morning was the punishment. It hit me at 4 in the morning. I woke up not gagging, but convulsing. My body was trying to expel something deep and systemic. I barely made it to the toilet before I was violently ill. This was not the usual morning sickness. This was a purge. I heaved until my stomach was empty, and then I heaved some more. My hands cramped into claws, the muscles locking up in painful spasms. I was sweating, soaking through my pajamas, but I was freezing cold. I collapsed on the bath mat, gasping, tears streaming down my face. My throat burned, my chest ached, the necklace felt heavy, like a stone dragging me down to the floor. "June?" The lights flicked on. Ethan stood in the doorway, blinking against the sudden brightness. He looked at me, huddled on the floor, pale, shaking, a mess of sweat and misery, and his expression shifted from sleepiness to a hard, resolved concern. He did not rush to comfort me. He did not get a washcloth. He stood there and looked at me like I was a broken appliance that he had finally decided to replace. "This has to stop," he said quietly. "I am sick, Ethan," I sobbed, clutching my stomach. I think I need to go to the hospital." "No more hospitals," he said, stepping into the room. "They do not know what they are doing. We are done playing around with this." He knelt down beside me, but he did not touch me. He looked at my face, then down at my neck, where the chain was visible above the collar of my pajamas. "We are going to my mother's on Sunday," he said. It was not a question. "She has set up an appointment with Arrington for Monday morning. We will stay at her place Sunday night so she can monitor you." "No," I croaked. "I do not want to go to Diane's. Please, Ethan, I just want to rest." "You are not resting. June, you are dying," he said. The word hung there, stark and brutal. "Look at you. You can barely stand. Mom is right. You need serious help, and you are going to get it." He stood up, towering over me. "I am going to call her and tell her we are coming. Do not argue with me on this." I looked up at him. I wanted to fight. I wanted to scream that his mother was the last person on earth I wanted to see. But the room was spinning, and my body felt like it had been hollowed out. I did not have the energy to fight him. Refusing Diane was always a war of attrition that Ethan never let me win. If I said no, he would just keep pushing, keep guilting, keep wearing me down until I crumbled anyway. "Okay," I whispered, closing my eyes. "Okay. Good," he said. He sounded relieved, but there was no warmth in it. "Go back to bed. I will bring you some water." He left the room. I heard him walking down the hallway, heard the murmur of his voice on the phone. He was calling her. At 4 in the morning, I lay on the cold tile for a long time, staring at the ceiling. The pain in my stomach was subsiding into a dull, rhythmic ache. I reached up and touched the pendant. It was warm again. I knew, with a sudden, crystal clarity, that I would not survive the weekend at Diane's. If I went into that house, under her roof, under her watch, I would never come out. They would hospitalize me, or medicate me, or I would just fade away in one of her guest rooms. Another tragic story for her to tell at her charity galas. I needed help, and I could not get it from my husband. I dragged myself up, using the towel rack for leverage. I stumbled back into the bedroom. Ethan was still in the living room, talking low and fast on the phone. I went to my purse, which was sitting on the chair by the window. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely work the zipper. I dug through the receipts and gum wrappers until my fingers brushed against the textured cardstock. Silas Mercer, Fine Antiquities and Restoration. I pulled my phone out. I checked the door. Ethan was still occupied. I sat on the edge of the bed and dialed the number. It was not a business hour. It was barely dawn. I expected a voicemail. I expected nothing. The phone rang twice. Then, a click. Hello? The voice was rough with sleep, but instantly alert. Mr. Mercer? I whispered, my voice breaking. It is June Riley, the woman from the train. There was a silence on the other end. A long, heavy pause. I thought he might have hung up. I thought maybe he had forgotten me. Then, he let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for 2 days. Thank God you called, Silas said, his voice dropping to a grave, terrifying whisper. I was not sure I got to you in time. I told Ethan I needed to go to the pharmacy. It was the frantic, humiliating lie of a desperate woman, but it bought me 1 hour. I told him I needed products for the nausea, things he would not want to discuss, and he let me go with a sympathetic nod and a reminder to be back before his mother called to finalize the brunch plans. I took a cab to the address on the card. Watching the city blur past the window through a haze of rain, the address, 14080 Street Northwest, was not a jewelry store. It was a narrow brick row house in a neighborhood that hovered between gentrification and decay. There was no sign, just a small brass plaque next to the doorbell that read S. Mercer. I buzzed. The lock clicked open instantly, as if he had been standing on the other side of the door waiting for me. The interior smelled of old paper, dust, and the sharp, coppery tang of heated metal. It was a workshop, not a showroom. There were no velvet displays or halogen lights designed to make diamonds sparkle. Instead, the room was lined with floor-to-ceiling wooden cabinets, each drawer labeled in a fading cursive script. In the center of the room sat a heavy workbench scarred by decades of cuts and burns, cluttered with pliers, files, and magnifying loupes. Silas Mercer stood behind the bench. He was wearing a thick leather apron over his shirt and tie, and he looked even more severe than he had on the train. He did not smile when I entered. He simply pointed to a wooden stool on the other side of the workbench. "Close the door," he said, "and lock it." I did as I was told. The heavy bolt slid home with a thud that made the silence in the room feel absolute. I walked over to the stool and sat down, clutching my purse against my stomach. "Did you bring it?" he asked. I nodded. My hands were shaking so badly I struggled to unzip the bag. I pulled out the necklace. It lay in my palm, gleaming innocently, the gold chain pooling like liquid light. It looked beautiful. It looked like love. Silas put on a pair of thick black rubber gloves. He did not reach for the necklace immediately. He adjusted a bright, articulated lamp, swinging it down until a circle of harsh white light illuminated a small velvet pad on the bench. "Place it there," he instructed. I laid the necklace on the pad and pulled my hand back quickly, as if the gold had teeth. Silas leaned in, pulling a dual-lens microscope over the pad. He adjusted the focus, his breathing slow and rhythmic. For a long time, the only sound in the room was the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner and the hum of the traffic outside. I watched his face. I watched the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes narrowed behind the lenses. "I need you to understand something before I open this, Mrs. Riley," Silas said, without looking up. "I am not just a jeweler. For 20 years, I consulted for the insurance industry and the federal courts on cases of high-value fraud and material contamination. I have seen diamonds drilled out and filled with lead. I have seen radioactive isotopes hidden in watch casings. I know what wrong looks like, because I have spent a lifetime studying the things people try to hide." He looked up at me then, his eyes magnified by the loupe. "When I saw you on the train, I did not just see a necklace. I saw a modification, a discrepancy in the refraction of the light along the edge. Vintage gold has a specific patina, a specific wear pattern. The seam on your pendant is too clean. It is too new." He reached for a tool, It was not a jeweler's screwdriver. It was a thin, terrifyingly sharp probe, like a dental pick. "This is going to be difficult to watch," he said softly. "But you need to see it." He used his left hand to stabilize the pendant. With his right hand, he inserted the tip of the probe into the tiny, invisible fissure he had pointed out on the subway. He applied pressure. It was not a brute force movement. It was a precise, calculated levering. There was a click. It was a soft sound, barely louder than a heartbeat. But in the quiet room, it sounded like a gunshot. The pendant did not break. It bloomed. The front face of the locket, the part with the floral engraving, slid sideways on a hidden track I had never known existed. It was not a standard hinge. It was a sliding lock, machined with incredible precision to be invisible to the naked eye. I leaned forward, my breath catching in my throat. Inside the hollow cavity of the pendant, nestled in a bed of dark, insulating foam, was a capsule. It was tiny, perhaps 5 millimeters long, made of a porous, gray ceramic material. It looked like a small pill or a bead. It looked completely harmless. "What is it?" I whispered. "Do not lean too close," Silas warned, holding up a hand. He picked up a pair of tweezers and gently, ever so gently, lifted the capsule out of the pendant. He held it up to the light. "It is a transdermal delivery system," he said, his voice devoid of emotion, clinical and cold. "The ceramic is microporous. It is designed to be stable at room temperature, but when it is heated, say by the constant 98-degree warmth of a human body pressing against it through a thin layer of gold, the pores expand, just slightly, just enough to release a microscopic amount of gas or vapor." He placed the capsule into a small glass vial and screwed the lid on tight. Only then did he exhale. "You said you felt it getting warm," Silas said, looking at me. "That was not the gold heating up. That was the chemical reaction inside the capsule. It generates heat as it degrades and releases the toxin. You were wearing a slow-release patch disguised as an heirloom." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the workbench, my knuckles turning white. "A toxin?" I asked. "Like poison?" "Likely a heavy metal compound or a synthetic nerve agent," Silas said. "Something that mimics natural illness, gastrointestinal distress, neurological symptoms, fatigue, hair loss. It is designed to look like a breakdown, like stress, like anxiety. If you had kept wearing this for another month, your organs would have started to shut down. The doctors would have called it autoimmune failure or a rare cancer. They would never have tested the jewelry." I stared at the empty gold shell on the velvet pad. It lay there, open and gutted, revealing its dark purpose. "It was a gift," I said, my voice sounding like it was coming from underwater. "For our anniversary, he put it on me. He clasped it." I remembered the moment, the candlelight dinner, the way Ethan had stood behind me, moving my hair aside, kissing the back of my neck before fastening the chain. "I want you to feel protected," he had said. He had been arming the weapon. "He asked me if I was still wearing it," I whispered. "Yesterday, he asked his mother if I was still wearing it." Silas did not look surprised. He reached under the bench and pulled out a digital camera. "We need to document this," he said. "Chain of custody is everything. If we are going to prove this, we need to show that the mechanism exists and that it was active." He began to take photos. Flash, the open pendant. Flash, the hidden track. Flash, the capsule in the vial. Flash. "I have a contact at a private toxicology lab in Maryland," Silas said as he worked. "He is discreet. He can break down the compound in that capsule and tell us exactly what it is. But more importantly, he can tell us where it came from. Chemicals like this leave a paper trail. They are not things you buy at a hardware store." He finished the photos and placed the vial into a plastic evidence bag. Sealing it with red tape, he dated it and signed across the seal. "I need to keep the capsule," he said, "but I'm going to clean the pendant and close it. You need to take the necklace back." "No," I said, recoiling. I do not want it. I never want to touch it again. You have to, Silas said firmly. Mrs. Riley, look at me. I looked up. His face was stern, but his eyes were kind. If you go home without that necklace, or if you tell your husband what you found today, you lose. He will destroy the evidence. He will claim you are hysterical. He will say you tampered with it. He will get away with it. He tried to kill me, I said. The reality of it was finally settling in, heavy and suffocating. Ethan tried to kill me. We do not know that yet, Silas said. We know the necklace is a weapon. We do not know for a fact that he knew what was inside it. He gave it to me, I cried. He bought it. And he might have bought it from someone who told him it was just a locket, Silas countered, though his tone suggested he did not believe that for a second. Or someone else could have had access to it. Does he have a housekeeper? A personal assistant? Does his family have access to your home? His mother, I said. Diane. Silas nodded slowly. Access is key. Jewelry like this does not get modified by strangers. It takes time. It takes money. And it takes a specific kind of hatred to put something this dangerous around someone's neck and watch them smile. He picked up the empty pendant. He used a cloth to wipe the interior, removing the foam residue. Then he clicked the face back into place. It snapped shut, looking once again like a perfect, seamless piece of art. I am going to put a dummy weight inside, he said. A piece of inert lead, just to match the heft. You are going to take this home. You are going to put it in your jewelry box, and you are going to act exactly as you have for the last 2 months. I can't, I said. I can't wear it. You do not have to wear it, Silas said. You just have to possess it. You have to let him see it. You have to let him think his plan is still working. If he thinks you are dying, he will get careless. He will make a mistake, and when he does, we will be ready. He handed the necklace back to me. It felt cold in my hand. It felt dead. Who are you? I asked, looking at the old man who had just saved my life. Why are you helping me? Silas began to clean his tools, wiping the probe with a methodical, rhythmic motion. I had a daughter, he said quietly. He did not look at me. She was married to a man who was very charming, very successful, and very impatient. She died 7 years ago. The coroner said it was heart failure. It was not. He placed the tool back in the drawer and closed it. I was too late for her, he said. I will not be too late for you. I left the shop 20 minutes later. The rain had stopped, but the sky was a bruised purple, heavy with unfallen storms. I walked to the corner and hailed a cab. My hands were still shaking, but it was not from fear anymore. It was from a cold, crystalline rage. I checked my phone. I had 3 missed calls from Ethan. I took a deep breath. Composing my face in the reflection of the cab window, I practiced my smile. I practiced the look of the sick, grateful wife. When I got home, the apartment was warm and smelled of roasted chicken. Ethan was in the kitchen, opening a bottle of wine. He looked up when I entered, his face arranging itself into a mask of concern. Hey, he said. You were gone a long time. I was getting worried. The line at the pharmacy was long, I said. My voice sounded steady. I was surprised by how easy the lie was. And I had to wait for the pharmacist to answer a question. Did you get what you needed? Yes, I said. I think so. He walked over to me, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He leaned in and kissed my forehead. His lips were soft. His hand came up to cup my cheek, his thumb brushing against my ear. You feel cool, he said. No fever? No fever, I said. His eyes flicked down to my neck. I had put the necklace back on in the cab. It sat there, the inert lead weight resting against my collarbone. I am glad you are wearing it, he said softly. I know you have been feeling awful, but you look beautiful. June. Thank you. Ethan, I said. I looked into his blue eyes, the eyes I had fallen in love with, the eyes I had trusted with my life. I looked for the monster behind them. I looked for the guilt. But there was nothing, just the same smooth, polished surface he had shown me for 3 years. He smiled, and I smiled back. I let him pull me into a hug. Resting my head against his chest, I could hear his heart beating, steady and strong. Thump thump, thump thump. It was a rhythm I used to find comforting. Now, it sounded like a clock ticking down. He held me tight, his arms wrapping around me, trapping me against him. "We are going to figure this out," he whispered into my hair. "I promise. We will get you fixed." "I know," I said. I stood there in the arms of my husband, the man who had promised to love and cherish me, and I realized with a terrifying clarity that I was standing in the embrace of my executioner. He was not trying to fix me. He was waiting for me to break. And for the first time in 6 weeks, I knew exactly what I had to do. I did not just have to survive. I had to make sure that when the trap finally snapped shut, I was not the one standing inside it. Saturday morning was a masterclass in domestic theater. I woke up next to the man I suspected of poisoning me, and I asked him if he wanted pancakes. I stood at the stove, flipping batter on the griddle, the smell of butter and vanilla filling the kitchen. It was a wholesome scene, the picture of a happy marriage on a weekend morning, but my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Every time Ethan walked behind me to get coffee, every time his shadow fell over me, my muscles seized. I expected a hand on my shoulder, a push, a whisper, but he just poured his coffee and hummed a tune he had heard on the radio. I needed to know the origin. Silas had said that access was key. Jewelry like this did not get modified by strangers. "Ethan," I said, keeping my voice light, pretending to focus on the browning edges of a pancake. "I was thinking about getting the necklace insured, since I wear it so much." I turned to look at him. He was leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone. He did not look up immediately. "Insured?" he asked. "It is not that expensive. June, it is sentimental." "Still," I pressed, "I would hate to lose it. Do you still have the receipt? Or do you remember the name of the place you got it?" He paused. It was a fraction of a second, but I saw it. His thumb stopped scrolling. His eyes flicked to the side, away from me. "A little boutique near the wharf," he said. The answer came out too fast, too rehearsed. "I do not remember the name. Something generic. Vintage Treasures or something like that. I paid cash." "Cash. Of course. No credit card trail." "That is a shame," I said, sliding a pancake onto his plate. "It is such a unique piece. I would have loved to see their other work." Ethan took the plate. He looked at me then, and his expression softened into that boyish, eager look that had charmed me 3 years ago. "Mom helped me pick it out, actually," he said. The spatula almost slipped from my hand. I gripped the handle, forcing my fingers to stay rigid. "Diane?" I asked. "I did not know she went with you." "Yeah," Ethan said, pouring syrup. "I was struggling to find something. I am terrible at gifts. I called her, and she met me down there. She actually pointed this one out. She said it looked like something you would wear. She has a good eye, right?" "Yes," I said, my voice sounding hollow in my own ears. "She certainly does." The air in the kitchen suddenly felt too thin. Diane had been there. Diane had pointed it out. Diane, who had never liked me, who had spent 3 years making me feel like a temporary inconvenience, had selected the very object that was slowly killing me. Did she know? Or was she just the vehicle? "She was so excited about it," Ethan continued, oblivious to the ice spreading through my veins. "She kept asking if I had given it to you yet. She really wants us to be happy. June. I know you think she is cold, but she tries." "Right," I said. "She tries." Sunday lunch at Diane's was a ritual I usually dreaded for its boredom. But today, I walked into her penthouse condo feeling like I was stepping into a cage match. The apartment was exactly like Diane. Expensive, beige, and temperature-controlled to a degree that felt unnatural. The air smelled of lilies and lemon polish. Diane Caldwell was waiting for us in the foyer. She was 62 years old, but looked 50, thanks to a strict regimen of Pilates, kale, and very expensive dermatologists. She wore a cream-colored cashmere sweater and pearls. Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "June," she said, bypassing a hug and offering a cheek that I was expected to air kiss. "You look tired." "I have been under the weather," I said, stepping back. "Yes, Ethan told me," she said. Her eyes immediately dropped to my throat. I was wearing the necklace. I had to. Silas had been clear. Act normal. "But you are still wearing the pendant," she cooed, her voice dripping with a theatrical sweetness that set my teeth on edge. "It really is a stunning piece. I am so glad it works with your complexion." She reached out. It happened in slow motion. Her hand, manicured and adorned with a diamond solitaire that cost more than my college tuition, moved toward my neck. She wasn't reaching to strangle me. She was reaching to touch the locket, to fondle the gold she had helped choose. "Let me see it in the light," she said. My body reacted before my brain could stop it. I flinched. It was a sharp, violent jerk of my head. Pulling away from her fingers, I took a half step back, my hand flying up to cover the pendant defensively. The silence that followed was deafening. Diane's hand froze in midair. Her smile did not drop, but her eyes changed. The polite social veneer vanished for half a second, replaced by a cold, reptilian calculation. Her pupils contracted. She looked at my hand covering the necklace, then up at my eyes. She was checking. She was not admiring the jewelry. She was verifying the asset. She was checking to see if the mouse was still taking the bait. "I am sorry," I stammered, lowering my hand. My skin is sensitive today. It is the medication." Diane slowly lowered her hand. The shark-like focus smoothed back over into polite concern. "Of course," she said softly. "You poor thing. Nerves can make us so jumpy. Can they not?" She turned and walked into the dining room, her heels clicking on the marble floor. I looked at Ethan. He was staring at me, his jaw tight, his eyes furious. He didn't say anything, but the message was clear. Stop embarrassing me. Lunch was an ordeal. We sat at a glass table that seemed designed to prevent anyone from touching anyone else. We ate poached salmon and asparagus. Diane talked about the opera board, her garden club, and the renovations she was planning for the guest suite. "I am thinking of turning the second bedroom into a proper library," she said, slicing her asparagus with surgical precision. "I have so many boxes in storage I need to sort through. It is ridiculous. You should just hire someone to do it." "Mom," Ethan said, taking a sip of white wine. "I cannot hire strangers to go through family history." "Ethan," she chided, "there are papers in there, documents, and all those old things of yours I never threw away." She looked at me then, a small, tight smile playing on her lips. "Ethan was such a little hoarder as a child," she said to me. "I have a locked storage room in the basement of the building just full of his old hobbies. Chemistry sets, photography equipment, old electronics. He never lets me throw anything out." My fork paused halfway to my mouth. Chemistry sets, photography equipment. Silas had said the capsule was ceramic, porous, advanced. But the toxin? A heavy metal compound? Something that could be mixed? And photography equipment involved chemicals, developing fluids, fixatives. "I did not know you were into chemistry," I said to Ethan, keeping my voice even. Ethan shrugged, looking embarrassed. "I went through a phase in high school. I wanted to be a scientist before I realized there was no money in it. It is just junk. Mom, toss it." "I would not dream of it," Diane said. "You might want it someday, for your own children." She took a sip of her water, her eyes locking onto mine over the rim of the glass. "If you ever manage to get healthy enough to have them, that is." The insult was so casual, so practiced, that it took a moment to land. "Mom," Ethan warned. "What?" Diane blinked innocently. "I am just concerned, darling. June looks frail. Frailty is not good for..." The future. I put my fork down. I felt the anger rising, hot and bright, burning through the fear. I am not frail, Diane, I said. I am resilient. We shall see, she said. The drive home was silent for the first 10 minutes. Ethan gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. I stared out the window at the passing D.C. streets, the monuments glowing in the distance like white bones. Why do you always make things weird with her? Ethan finally snapped. I didn't look at him. I did not make it weird. She insulted me. She implied I am too weak to have children. She is worried about you, Ethan shouted, hitting the steering wheel. She is trying to connect, and you flinch like she is going to hit you. Do you have any idea how that looks? She helped me pick out that necklace because she wanted to do something nice for you. She wanted to bridge the gap. Bridge the gap? I laughed, a harsh, dry sound. Ethan, she hates me. She has always hated me. She tolerates me because I am married to you. That is not true. It is true, I said, turning to face him. And you know it. You just pretend not to see it, because it is easier for you. I am not having this conversation again, he said, shaking his head. Ethan, I said, my voice dropping to a quiet, deadly serious tone. If you had to choose, right now, between your mother and me, if you had to pick one of us to trust, one of us to protect, who would it be? The car idled at a red light. The engine hummed. Ethan stared straight ahead. The light turned green. He pressed the gas. That is a ridiculous question, he said. I do not have to choose. You are my wife. She is my mother. It is different. It is not different, I said. It is the only question that matters. I am not answering it, he said. He didn't have to. The silence was the answer. Neutrality is just abandonment with better manners. He wouldn't pick me. He would never pick me. If Diane told him the sky was green, he would buy green paint. And if she told him his wife was crazy, or sick, or a liability, what would he do then? We got home around 4 o'clock. Ethan went straight to his study, claiming he had work to catch up on. I knew he just wanted to get away from me. I went into the bedroom. I needed to take the necklace off. Even though I knew the lead weight inside was harmless, the psychological weight of it was crushing me. I felt like the gold was branding my skin. I unclasped it and laid it in my jewelry box, a small, velvet-lined case on top of the dresser. I placed it in the center compartment. I curled the chain into a perfect circle, with the pendant resting exactly in the middle, the clasp pointing toward the north. I had started doing this 2 days ago. It was a test, a trap. I closed the lid. I changed into sweats and spent the next 3 hours in the living room, pretending to read a book while my mind raced. Chemistry sets, locked storage room. Mom helped me pick it. The pieces were moving on the board, but I couldn't see the whole game yet. Diane had the malice. Ethan had the access. But did Ethan know? Or was he a pawn? Was he just a stupid mama's boy carrying a weapon he didn't understand? But he had asked if I was wearing it. He had reported back to her. She is still wearing it? Yes, of course. He was not innocent. He might be weak, but he was complicit. At 7 o'clock, Ethan came out of the study. I am going to grab some takeout, he said, not looking at me. Ty? Fine, I said. I will be back in 30 minutes. He left. I heard the lock click. I waited 1 minute, then I got up and walked into the bedroom. The apartment was silent. The air conditioner hummed. I walked to the dresser. I looked at the jewelry box. It looked exactly as I had left it. The lid was closed. I took a deep breath and lifted the lid. My stomach dropped. The necklace was there, but the chain was not in a perfect circle anymore. It was slightly oval, pushed to the left, and the clasp. The clasp was not pointing north. It was tucked underneath the pendant. Someone had opened the box. Someone had lifted the necklace. Someone had checked it. I had been in the living room the whole time. Ethan had been in the study. The study was down the hall, past the bedroom. He would have had to walk past the bedroom door to get to the kitchen or the bathroom. He must have slipped in while I was in the kitchen getting water earlier, or maybe he did it right before he came out to ask about dinner. Why? Why check it? Unless he suspected, unless my flinch at lunch had given me away, unless Diane had texted him and said, "She acted strange. Check the device." I stared at the disturbed gold chain. He wasn't just checking if I owned it. He was checking the weight. He was checking the mechanism. Silas was right. It was a domestic chess match. And Ethan had just made a move. He knew something was up. I closed the box gently. I went back to the living room and sat down. I picked up my book. When Ethan came back 20 minutes later with the smell of pad thai clinging to his coat, I smiled at him. "Hungry?" he asked. "Starving," I said. He sat down next to me on the couch. Opening the cartons, he handed me a pair of chopsticks. "I am sorry about today," he said, his voice soft. "I know Mom can be difficult. I just want peace. June, I just want us to be okay." "I know," I said, taking the food. "I want that too." I looked at his hands as he opened his own carton. Strong hands, capable hands, hands that had held me, held the necklace, held the future he was trying to steal from me. He had checked the necklace. He knew I had flinched. The pressure was building. If he knew I was onto him, the slow poison wouldn't be enough anymore. He would have to accelerate. I ate my noodles, chewing slowly, counting the seconds. The game had changed. It wasn't about investigation anymore. It was about survival, and I needed to get into that storage room. 2 days later, Silas Mercer called me while I was standing in the stairwell at work, hiding from my colleagues and the suffocating sympathy in their eyes. "We have a match," he said. His voice was tinny over the cell connection, but the gravity of his tone cut through the static. "The lab finished the spectral analysis this morning. The residue inside the ceramic capsule is a synthetic compound derived from dimethylmercury, but modified for higher volatility. It is not something you find in a thermometer. Mrs. Riley, it is industrial, it is restricted, and it is designed to bypass the blood-brain barrier." I leaned my head against the cold concrete wall, closing my eyes. "Dimethylmercury," I repeated, tasting the syllables. They sounded like science fiction. They sounded like a weapon. "The dosage is microscopic," Silas continued, "which is the only reason you're still walking. It relies on cumulative exposure. Body heat warms the gold. The gold warms the ceramic. The pores open, and the vapor is absorbed directly through the skin of your neck. It is elegant, in a horrific sort of way. It mimics autoimmune collapse, fatigue, nausea, tremors, eventually, cognitive decline. If you had worn it for another 3 months, you would have gone into a coma, and the autopsy would have likely ruled it as a stroke or an aneurysm. "Is it lethal?" I asked. Though I already knew the answer. "It is 100% lethal given enough time," Silas said. "And the beauty of it, for them, is that by the time you die, the chemical has mostly metabolized. A standard toxicology screen would miss it completely. You need to be looking for the specific degradation markers." "Thank you, Silas," I whispered. "Do not thank me yet," he said. "Now you need to survive long enough to prove who bought it. Keep up the act. And Mrs. Riley, watch your back. People who use poison are patient, but they are also cowardly. If they think the poison is not working, they might try something faster." I hung up and went straight to Mara's clinic. We did not do lunch this time. I met her in exam room B during her break. She locked the door and pulled out a fresh file folder. "I am putting this under a pseudonym in the private records," Mara said, snapping on latex gloves. "If we put it in the main system, Ethan might see the insurance billing. We will call you Jane Doe for now. Clever, right?" She drew 3 vials of blood. She took hair samples. She documented my weight. I was down another 4 pounds, and photographed the faint red irritation that was starting to fade from my neck. "This is your insurance policy," Mara said, labeling the vials with a Sharpie. "If anything happens to you, if you faint, if you end up in the ER, if you disappear, I have these. I can prove you were being poisoned before you got there. They cannot gaslight a corpse. June. That is morbid. Mara. That is reality, she said, stripping off the gloves. You are living in a house with a man who is actively trying to murder you. You do not get to be squeamish anymore. She was right. I left the clinic feeling lighter. Not because the danger had passed, but because I was no longer a victim waiting to die. I was a witness building a case. That afternoon, I stopped at an electronics store and bought 3 small, wireless security cameras. When I got home, I told Ethan a story about a package from my mother being stolen from the hallway. I just do not feel safe, I said, widening my eyes, playing up the fragility he seemed to love so much lately. I keep hearing noises. I think someone is checking the doors. Ethan, usually dismissive of my anxieties, was surprisingly supportive. If it makes you feel better, put them up, he said. Whatever helps you relax. I put one in the hallway facing the front door. I put one in the living room. And I put one in the bedroom, sitting innocently on a bookshelf, aimed not at the bed, but at the dresser, at the jewelry box. It is just to cover the windows, I told him when he asked about the bedroom camera. In case someone comes up the fire escape. He bought it, or maybe he just did not care because he thought he was smarter than me. For the next week, I lived a double life. When I heard Ethan's key in the lock, I transformed. I slumped my shoulders. I rubbed safe, non-toxic blush around my eyes to make them look rimmed and weary. I put on the necklace with the lead weight inside. I greeted him with a weak smile and a complaint about my stomach. I threw up twice today. I would lie. I feel so dizzy. And he would play his part. He would hold me, stroke my hair, and look at me with that terrifyingly empty concern. I am so sorry, babe. Did you take your meds? The moment he left for work in the morning, the transformation reversed. I took off the necklace and locked it in the jewelry box. I did yoga in the living room to keep my strength up. I ate calorie-dense protein bars that I hid in my tampon box, the one place I knew he would never look. I wrote down everything in a small black notebook I kept taped to the underside of my office desk drawers. Monday. Ethan checked the necklace twice, once at 6 p.m., once at 11 p.m. while I was sleeping. Tuesday. Ethan asked if I wanted to increase my life insurance. Said it was a good time to review assets. Wednesday. No nausea. Strength returning. The decoy is working. But the hardest part was the phone. Diane had started texting me. Before all this, I would hear from my mother-in-law maybe once a month. Usually a criticism disguised as a question. Are you still working that job? Or, have you considered bangs to hide your forehead? Now. My phone pinged every day at noon. Thinking of you? June. Hope you are resting. I found a tea that helps with nausea. I will bring it over. Stay strong. Ethan needs you. The messages were chilling. They were not affectionate. They were supervisory. She was checking in on her investment. She was prodding the experiment to see if it was yielding results. She is trying to keep you close, Mara said when I showed her the texts. She wants to be the benevolent matriarch, so when you kick the bucket, no one suspects the grieving mother-in-law. I think she is the one driving this, I said. Ethan is weak. He does what she tells him. She is the one with the killer instinct. I decided to dig into Diane. I spent an entire evening scrolling through her social media. Diane was not a heavy poster, but she liked to curate an image of old money elegance, photos of galas, her prize-winning hydrangeas, her purebred poodles. I scrolled back 3 months, 4 months, I found it. It was a photo posted in mid-November, about 2 weeks before our anniversary. It was taken in a mirror, likely by a shop assistant. Diane was standing at a glass counter, looking regal in a fur coat. Beside her was Ethan, looking handsome and dutiful. They were not at a boutique near the wharf, like Ethan had claimed. I zoomed in on the background. The display case behind them held antique pocket watches and loose gemstones. There was a sign on the wall, partially cut off, but legible enough. Myth Sons Est. 1920. I opened a new tab and searched for jewelers in D.C. with Smith in the name. Nothing matched the aesthetic. I tried Goldsmith, Aerosmith. Finally, I searched for the reflection in the mirror behind them. A street sign, Lombard Street. That was in Baltimore, not D.C. They had gone out of state. The caption read, "Shopping for special things with my favorite son. He has such a generous heart." I stared at the screen. Generous heart. She was talking about a man buying a murder weapon. I felt a surge of triumph. I had them. They lied about the location. They were together. Diane was the architect. I called Silas immediately. "I found a photo," I said, rushing the words out. "They were in Baltimore, a place that sells antiques. Diane was with him. It has to be her. Silas, she hates me. She has the money. She found the mechanism." Silas listened, his breathing steady on the other end of the line. "It is a good lead," he said cautiously, "but be careful with confirmation bias. June, we see what we expect to see." "What is that supposed to mean?" I asked, annoyed. "The evidence points to her." "Does it?" Silas asked. "Think about the method. Poison is intimate, yes, but a time-release mechanism inside a piece of gold? That is expensive. It is complicated. It is not a crime of passion. It is not just, 'I hate my daughter-in-law.' It is an investment." So, Silas said, his voice dropping an octave. "People do not usually spend $10,000 on a custom assassination device just because they do not like someone's personality. This method is not impulsive. It is financial, or it is strategic. You need to look at the money. June, follow the money." The line went dead. Follow the money. I sat in the dark living room, the glow of the laptop illuminating my face. Ethan and I kept our finances separate. It was his idea, early in the marriage. "Simpler that way," he had said. "I paid for groceries, utilities, and my own car. He paid the mortgage and the big-picture investments. I had never really questioned it. I trusted him." I looked at the filing cabinet in the corner of the office. It was locked. Ethan always kept the key on his keyring. I waited until I heard the shower running. Ethan took long showers, 20 minutes at least. I crept into the bedroom. His pants were draped over the chair. I fished the keys out of his pocket, my heart hammering so loud I thought he would hear it through the water and the tile. I ran back to the office. I unlocked the cabinet. The files were meticulously organized. Mortgage, taxes, car. I flipped through them, my fingers flying. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Standard debt, standard payments. Then I saw a folder labeled Arborwell Benefits, 2025/2026. Arborwell was my company. Why did Ethan have a file on my benefits? I pulled it out. Inside was a stack of paperwork. I recognized the logo. It was the open enrollment confirmation from last November. I remembered signing off on it quickly one evening when Ethan said he had reviewed the options to maximize our tax bracket. I scanned the pages. Health insurance, dental, vision. Then I turned the page to voluntary life insurance. My breath hitched. The standard company policy was one time my annual salary, but here, the box for supplemental life was checked. The coverage amount was not one time my salary. It was $2 million. I stared at the number, $2 million. The premium was being deducted from a joint account I rarely checked. An account we used for household repairs. I felt sick. Not the poison sick, the soul sick. He had bet against me. He had bought a lottery ticket where the winning number was my death. My eyes moved down the page to the beneficiary designation section. The paper was folded at the bottom, a crease running right through the line. I could see the word primary, and then a typed name that was partially obscured by the fold. I expected to see Ethan Caldwell. It had to be him. He was my husband. He was the one who would collect. But the first letter wasn't E, it was K. I frowned. K? I unfolded the page completely, smoothing it out on the desk. The name typed in the beneficiary line was clear, black, and undeniable. Primary beneficiary, Kelsey Caldwell. Relationship, Sister-in-law. Allocation, 100%. I stared at the name, Kelsey, Ethan's sister, Kelsey, the party girl, Kelsey, who was always in between jobs, Kelsey, who owed money to half the city, and whom Diane constantly bailed out. Why? Why would Ethan kill his wife and give the money to his sister? Unless he couldn't take the money, unless he knew that if I died under suspicious circumstances, the husband is always the first suspect. Insurance companies investigate spouses. They delay payouts. But a sister-in-law? A grieving sister-in-law listed on a policy signed by the victim? That looks like charity. That looks like family love. And once Kelsey got the money, she would just hand it over to him. Or maybe. I remembered the texts I had seen on Ethan's phone months ago. Messages from Kelsey asking for help with the guy from Granite Harbor. My hands shook as I took a picture of the document with my phone. "Why is your sister listed?" I whispered to the empty room. The shower turned off. I froze. I shoved the papers back into the folder. I jammed the folder back into the cabinet. I locked it. I ran back to the bedroom, my bare feet slapping against the hardwood. I slipped the keys back into his pocket, just as the bathroom door handle turned. I dove into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin, my heart racing at a pace that felt like a heart attack. Ethan walked out, a towel around his waist, steam billowing behind him. He looked fresh, clean, and handsome. "Hey," he said, smiling at me. "I thought you were asleep." Just resting," I stammered. He walked over to the dresser. He opened the jewelry box. I watched him through my eyelashes. He touched the necklace. He adjusted the chain. He was checking the weapon. "You should wear this tomorrow," he said, not looking at me. "We have that dinner with the partners on Friday. I want you to look your best." "Okay," I said. "I will." He closed the box and turned off the light. "Good night, June," he said. "Good night." I lay there in the dark. The image of the insurance paper burned into my retinas. Kelsey Caldwell. $2 million. It wasn't just a marriage gone wrong. It wasn't just a mother-in-law who hated me. It was a family business, and I was the product they were liquidating. The next morning, I decided to pull the trigger on the confrontation. I needed to see how he danced. Ethan was tying his tie in the mirror, whistling that same tuneless melody he always hummed when he thought he was winning. I stood in the doorway, holding a cup of coffee that I had no intention of drinking, and watched him. He looked so normal. He looked like a man preparing for a Tuesday, not a widower preparing for a payday. "I was looking for the car title last night," I said, my voice steady. I opened the file cabinet. Ethan's hands froze on the silk knot. He did not turn around. He watched my reflection in the glass. "I thought we agreed that the filing cabinet is messy right now," he said. His tone was light, but the whistle had stopped. "I saw the life insurance update. Ethan." He turned then, his face arranging itself into a mask of mild confusion. "Okay, and?" "I saw the beneficiary," I said. "Why is Kelsey listed as the primary on $2 million of coverage for me?" I watched his eyes. I was looking for panic, for guilt, for the stutter of a man caught in a lie. But Ethan just sighed, rolling his eyes as if I had asked him why he hadn't taken out the trash. "June, honestly," he said, walking over to the bed to pick up his jacket. "You are reading way too much into standard administrative shuffling. It is a tax shelter thing. The accountant suggested we move some potential assets into a trust structure to lower our liability this year. Kelsey is just the trustee name on the form until the paperwork clears for the joint holding." "A trustee?" I asked. It said 100% beneficiary. It did not say trustee. "It is temporary," he snapped, his patience fraying at the edges. "It is just paperwork. It will be switched back to you, or rather, to me, by the next quarter. Why are you digging through this stuff anyway? Do you not trust me to handle the finances?" "It just seems strange," I said, backing down intentionally. I needed him to think I was satisfied. "To list your sister, she is not exactly Responsible, Ethan laughed. A short, sharp bark. Tell me about it. But that is why it works. She has no income, so the tax bracket is lower. Look, I will fix it, okay? I will call the broker today and get a confirmation letter sent over so you can stop worrying. Jesus, June, you are paranoid about everything lately. He kissed me on the cheek, a dry, perfunctory peck, and walked out the door. He never called the broker. He never sent a confirmation letter. And I knew, with cold certainty, that the tax shelter was a lie. You do not shelter taxes with a death benefit unless you plan on triggering it. He is lying, Mara said. We were sitting in her car, parked 2 blocks away from Diane's condominium complex. The engine was idling. I know, I said, but now he knows I looked. That means his timeline just sped up. If he thinks I'm suspicious, he has to act before I change the policy myself. Then we need to find the source today, Mara said. We need to link the chemical to them. Did you get the code? Yes. Diane had been bragging for weeks about donating boxes of junk to the Junior League charity auction. I had texted her that morning, offering to go over and catalog the items for her so she wouldn't have to hire an appraiser. She had been delighted to have the free labor. The concierge will let you into the storage cages, she had texted back. Do not throw away anything that looks like silver. It was the perfect pretext. We walked into the building, signing in at the front desk. The concierge, a bored man named Arthur who had seen me a dozen times, handed over the key to cage 4B without blinking. The storage area was in the basement, a labyrinth of chain-link cages filled with the detritus of wealthy lives. The air was cool and smelled of dry rot and mothballs. We found 4B at the end of a long concrete corridor. It was packed floor to ceiling, antique furniture, boxes of china, rolled-up rugs, and stacks of plastic bins. Okay, I whispered, pulling on a pair of latex gloves I had swiped from Mara's supply. We are looking for anything chemical, photography, cleaning, industrial. Silas said the compound was derived from dimethylmercury or a similar heavy metal. It would be in a glass or metal container, probably old. We started digging. It was frantic work. We moved boxes of old tax records and dusty velvet curtains. We found a collection of porcelain dolls that stared at us with dead glass eyes. We found Ethan's old college textbooks. June, Mara hissed from the back corner. Look at this. I scrambled over a rolled-up Persian rug to get to her. She was kneeling in front of a wooden crate labeled EC, Hobbies. Inside, it was a time capsule of a boy who liked to take things apart. Old circuit boards, a soldering iron, a broken microscope, and in the bottom corner, wedged between a stack of National Geographic magazines and a deflated football, was a metal tin. It was square, rusted at the corners, with a faded paper label that looked like it was from the 1950s. Taxidermy preservative soap. Contains arsenic and mercuric chloride. Poison. My heart stopped. Mercuric chloride, I whispered. Silas said it was a heavy metal derivative. This is it. This is the source material. It makes sense, Mara said, her voice low. Ethan was into science, right? Maybe he used this for an experiment years ago and kept it. Or maybe Diane bought it at an estate sale thinking it was just a tin. No, I said, reaching for my phone. Look at the seal. I pointed to the lid. The rust around the rim was disturbed. There were fresh scratches in the metal, shining bright silver against the dull brown of the oxidation. Someone opened this, I said. Recently, I took photos. I photographed the label, the scratched lid, the crate, the context. I did not touch the tin itself. Silas had been strict about that. Do not contaminate yourself, and do not leave prints. We have it, I said, my hands shaking. We have the source. We can prove he had access to the poison. Let's go, Mara said. Standing up, this place creeps me out. We restacked the boxes carefully, trying to make it look untouched. We backed out of the cage and I locked the padlock. We turned to leave and froze, standing at the end of the concrete corridor, Blocking the exit was Kelsey Caldwell. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a tracksuit that cost more than my car, but she looked like a wreck. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was clutching a large iced coffee like a lifeline. She didn't look surprised to see us. She looked furious. "I knew it," she spat, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. She walked toward us, her heels clicking aggressively. She didn't look at Mara. She locked her eyes on me. "I knew you would come snooping," Kelsey said. "Diane told me you offered to help. I told her it was a trap." "Kelsey," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "We were just organizing the donation boxes. Diane asked me to—" "Cut the crap. June," Kelsey interrupted. Stopping 3 feet away from me, she smelled of stale wine and expensive perfume. "You are not here to help. You are here to plant something." I blinked. "Plant something?" "You think we do not know?" she hissed. She took a step closer, lowering her sunglasses to reveal bloodshot eyes. "Ethan told me everything. He told me how you have been acting, the paranoia, the accusations. He told me you asked about the insurance money. I asked because my name was taken off the policy. Kelsey," I said, my voice hardening. "And yours was put on—" "Because you are unstable," she screamed. The sound bounced around the basement. "Ethan is trying to protect the assets," she yelled. "He knows you are spiraling. He showed me the texts you sent him, gibberish about hot metal and poisons. He showed me the doctor's notes about your anxiety. And now you are here, digging through our family history, trying to find something you can use to blackmail Diane." My blood ran cold. She didn't ask what I found. She didn't look at the cage. She didn't ask, "What is in there?" She assumed I was framing them, but beneath the anger, there was something else, a deflection. "I did not plant anything," I said quietly. "I found a tin of mercuric chloride in Ethan's old hobby box. The seal was broken." Kelsey's face didn't register shock. It didn't register confusion. It registered annoyance. "So what?" she sneered. "Ethan used to collect bugs. He used that stuff to preserve butterflies when he was 12. You are going to try and say he is poisoning you with butterfly soap? You are pathetic." She knew about the tin. She knew exactly what was in that box. A normal person would say, "What is mercuric chloride?" Kelsey said. "He used it for butterflies." She had the cover story ready. "You need to leave," Kelsey said, stepping aside and pointing to the exit. "Right now, before I call the police and have you arrested for trespassing, and if you think you can take half of Ethan's money in a divorce with this crazy act. You are wrong. We have proof. June, we have records of every missed day of work, every crazy thing you have said for 6 months. No judge will believe you." I looked at her, at the sister who was set to inherit $2 million on my death, and I realized Silas was right. It wasn't just Ethan. It wasn't just Diane. It was a closed loop. They were all protecting the pot of gold, and I was just the obstacle standing in the way of the payout. "Come on." "June," Mara said, grabbing my arm. She pulled me past Kelsey. As we walked away, Kelsey shouted after us, "Stay away from my mother. She is a saint for tolerating you." We didn't stop until we were back in Mara's car with the doors locked. "She knew," Mara said, starting the engine. "She knew exactly what was in that tin. She did not even blink." "She is in on it," I said, staring at the brick building. "Ethan is the executioner. Diane is the architect. And Kelsey is the cleaner. She is the one who will help them spend the money. We need to get you out of that apartment," Mara said. "Tonight, you cannot sleep there." "I have to," I said. "If I leave now, they win. They will say I had a psychotic break and ran away. I need one more thing. I need to see him do it." "Do what?" "I need to see him load the gun." I got home at 5 o'clock. The apartment was empty. Ethan was still at work. My hands were trembling so badly I dropped my keys twice trying to open the door. I locked it behind me and threw the deadbolt. I went straight to the guest room where I had set up the laptop that acted as the server for the security cameras. I hadn't checked the footage in 3 days because I had been so focused on the insurance paperwork. I sat down and opened the program. I clicked on camera 3, bedroom. I scrubbed the timeline back. Wednesday, empty room, me sleeping. Tuesday, empty room. I went back to Monday, the day I had started feeling better, the day I had left the necklace in the box until the last possible second. I watched the timestamp, 7:45 a.m. I saw myself leave the room to go to the kitchen. 7:47 a.m. Ethan walked into the frame. He was dressed for work, wearing his navy suit. He looked toward the door, checking the hallway. Then he walked over to the dresser. He opened the jewelry box. I leaned closer to the screen, holding my breath. He picked up the necklace. He didn't just look at it. He didn't just admire it. He held the pendant in his left hand. With his right hand, he pulled a small, silver object from his pocket. It looked like a small vial or a dropper. He used his thumb to slide the face of the locket open. I gasped. The motion was practiced, smooth. He knew exactly where the hidden catch was. He tipped the silver vial over the open cavity. He was not pouring a liquid. He was using a pair of tweezers to drop something inside, a small gray bead, the capsule. He snapped the locket shut. He wiped it with a handkerchief from his pocket to remove fingerprints. He placed it back in the box, arranging the chain carefully. Then he looked at the camera. For a second, I thought he saw it. I thought he was looking right at me through time, but his eyes glazed over the bookshelf. He checked his watch, smoothed his tie, and walked out of the frame. I sat back in the chair, the silence of the room roaring in my ears. I had it. I had him. It wasn't a theory anymore. It wasn't a suspicion. I had a video of my husband loading a lethal dose of poison into an anniversary gift while I was making him coffee in the next room. He wasn't doing it because he was pressured by his mother. He wasn't doing it because he was weak. I watched the clip again. I watched his face. He was smiling. It was a small, tight smile of satisfaction. The smile of a man who thinks he has solved a difficult problem. He didn't hate me. That would have been easier. He just didn't care. I was a line item on a spreadsheet that he was trying to delete. I saved the file. I emailed it to Mara. I emailed it to Silas. I uploaded it to a cloud drive he couldn't access. Then I heard the front door open. "June?" Ethan's voice called out from the hallway. "I am home. I picked up Thai food." I closed the laptop. I stood up. My legs felt like wood. I walked out into the hallway to greet the man who had just tried to kill me for the 45th time. "Hey," I said. He was standing there, holding the takeout bag, looking handsome and successful and loving. "Hey," he said, leaning in to kiss me. "You look pale. Are you okay?" I looked at his lips. I looked at his neck. I wondered what it would feel like to wrap my hands around it and squeeze. "I am fine," I said, forcing the words past the bile in my throat. "Just a little headache." "Did you wear the necklace today?" he asked, glancing at my bare neck. "I took it off to shower," I lied. "I will put it back on for dinner." "Good," he said. "I like it when you wear it." I turned and walked into the kitchen, my hand brushing against the knife block on the counter. Not yet, I told myself. Not yet. I had the proof. Now I needed the justice, and I wasn't going to let him settle out of court. I was going to make sure he lost everything, the money, the reputation, the freedom. I was going to burn his entire world down, and I was going to use his own weapon to do it. I sat in the glow of the monitor until my eyes burned, watching the same 10 seconds of footage on a loop. Ethan enters. Ethan checks the door. Ethan opens the box. It was the dexterity of his hands that shattered me. There was no hesitation, no fumbling with the clasp. He knew exactly how much pressure to apply to the hidden seam. He knew the precise angle to tilt the pendant so the capsule would slide into the reservoir. It was a muscle memory. He had practiced this. He had sat in this room, perhaps while I was sleeping 5 feet away, and rehearsed the act of killing me until he could do it with the casual efficiency of tying his shoelaces. I watched him smile that small, satisfied smile one more time, and then I closed the laptop. I did not cry. The part of me that could cry had incinerated hours ago, leaving behind something hard and cold, like diamond dust. I sent the video file to Silas. His response came 10 minutes later, a text message that felt like a death certificate for my marriage. I reviewed the footage. The tool handling is consistent with the marks I found on the capsule. He is using a jeweler's microdropper. This confirms he is not just a courier. June, he is the operator. He is maintaining the weapon. I stared at the phone. Operator. That was what I was to Ethan. Not a wife, not a partner. I was a malfunction in a machine he was trying to fix. But why? I knew about the life insurance, $2 million. But Ethan was a successful compliance officer. We lived well. $2 million was a fortune. Yes, but was it worth a murder charge? Was it worth watching the woman you slept beside vomit until she collapsed every morning? Usually, when husbands kill for money, it is because the walls are closing in. It is because they are drowning. I needed to see the water level. I waited until Ethan was in the shower the next morning. It was his routine. 20 minutes. Scalding hot water. Radio playing. I slipped his car keys off the dresser and ran out to the parking garage. His car, a silver sedan that he kept impeccably clean, smelled of leather and the vanilla air freshener he insisted on. I sat in the driver's seat and locked the doors. I didn't look in the glove box. That was too obvious. I looked where a desperate man would hide things. I checked under the mats. Nothing. I checked the spare tire well in the trunk. Nothing. Then I ran my hand under the driver's seat, feeling along the mechanical track. My fingers brushed against something hard and taped down. I ripped it free. It was a small, magnetic key box, the kind you use to hide a spare house key. But inside, there was no key. There was a SIM card and a folded piece of paper. I unfolded the paper first. It was a demand letter, but not from a bank. It was from a private equity firm called Granite Harbor Development. Final notice of default. Outstanding principal, $450,000. Interest accrued, $82,000. Immediate payment required to avoid legal action and disclosure to employer. I read it twice. $532,000. Ethan didn't just have a mortgage. He had $500,000 of secret debt. I looked at the date. The loan originated 18 months ago. That was around the time he had started talking about retiring early and passive income. He must have bought into some development deal, some can't-lose investment that collapsed, and he had leveraged everything he had to cover it. Disclosure to employer. That was the kicker. If his firm found out he was this leveraged, he would lose his security clearance. He would lose his job. He would lose the status he loved more than he loved me. I looked at the SIM card. I didn't have a spare phone to put it in, but I didn't need to. I searched the center console again, more thoroughly this time. I popped the plastic panel around the gear shift, a trick I learned from a crime podcast. There it was, a cheap, prepaid flip phone, wedged into the gap between the transmission tunnel and the carpet. I powered it on. The battery was at 12%. There were no calls in the log, only texts. The most recent message was from a contact listed only as K. K, did you check the dosage? She looks better today. Too much energy. Me. Ethan. I reloaded it on Monday. It takes time to build back up. Stop panicking. K, we don't have time. G is asking for the next installment. If she doesn't crash soon, we are going to miss the window for the claim. Me. She will crash. I upped the concentration. Just keep Mom distracted. K. Mom is easy. She thinks this is all about her legacy. She has no idea she is paying for your screw-up. I dropped the phone into my lap as if it were burning hot. K, Kelsey, and G, Granite Harbor. The picture snapped into focus with a clarity that was blinding. Diane wasn't the mastermind. Diane was the bank. Diane was the distraction. Ethan and Kelsey, the two disappointments of the Caldwell dynasty, had teamed up to save themselves. Ethan had the debt. Kelsey had the need for cash. And Diane? Diane was just a rich, unpleasant woman they were using as a shield. They knew I hated her. They knew I would suspect her. They were counting on my bias to keep me looking in the wrong direction while they bled me dry. Mom is easy. She has no idea she is paying for your screw-up. Diane didn't know. The realization hit me hard. She was cruel. Yes, she was controlling. But she wasn't a murderer. She was just a mother who thought her son was going through a rough patch, unaware that he was financing his failures with his wife's life. I took photos of the texts with my own phone. I took photos of the demand letter. Then I put everything back exactly as I found it. The phone in the console, the letter under the seat. I ran back up to the apartment, my heart pounding a rhythm of pure adrenaline. I managed to put the keys back on the dresser just as the water in the bathroom turned off. When Ethan walked out, steam billowing around him, I was sitting on the bed, putting on my socks. "Morning," he said, flashing that boyish grin. "You look nice." "Thanks," I said. He sat down next to me. Too close. He put an arm around my shoulders and squeezed. "I was thinking," he said, his voice dropping to a tender, concerned register. "I hate seeing you suffer like this. June, the nausea, the paranoia about the neighbors. It is taking a toll." Here it came, the pivot. "I called a friend of mine," he continued. "Dr. Lasky. He is a psychiatrist, specializes in stress disorders and somatic symptoms. He can see you this afternoon. I really think you should go. For us." He was building the paper trail. First the medical records for anxiety, now a psychiatrist. He wanted a professional to document that I was unstable. That way, when the poison finally stopped my heart, or when I accidentally took too many sleeping pills because of the stress, the police would see a tragic history of mental illness, not a murder. "That is so thoughtful of you, Ethan," I said, turning to look at him. I let my eyes well up with fake tears. "I have been feeling so out of control lately." "I know, baby," he said, kissing my temple. "We will get you help, I promise." "I will go," I said. "I will do anything to get better." He smiled. It was the smile of a man who just checked a box on a to-do list. "That is my brave girl." I did not go to Dr. Lasky. Instead, I went to a diner on the outskirts of Alexandria to meet a man Silas had recommended. Detective Miller was retired from the Metro PD homicide unit. He was a heavy man with sad eyes and hands that looked like they could crush a walnut. He sat in the booth across from me, reading the file I had prepared, the photos of the necklace, the lab report from Silas, the texts from the burner phone, the insurance policy. He read for 20 minutes without speaking. He drank his black coffee. Finally, he closed the folder and looked at me. "You have a hell of a situation, Mrs. Riley," he said. His voice was gravelly, worn down by years of seeing the worst in people. "Is it enough?" I asked. "Is it enough to arrest him?" Miller sighed. He leaned back, clasping his hands over his stomach. "If you took this to a rookie cop, maybe they would bring him in for questioning, but a good defense attorney? They would tear this apart." "How?" I demanded. "I have video of him opening it." "You have video of him opening a piece of jewelry," Miller corrected. "You do not have video of what he put inside. He could say he was fixing the clasp. He could say he was putting a lock of hair inside. The video is grainy. It is not definitive." He tapped the lab report. "And this? This proves the necklace is toxic, but it does not prove he knew it. He could claim you bought it yourself. He could claim someone else tampered with it. Or he could claim he bought it antique and had no idea it was modified. Ignorance is a powerful defense when the husband looks like a choir boy." "So what do I do?" I asked, my voice rising. "Wait until I am dead? Then you will have a body." "We do not want a body," Miller said calmly. "We want a smoking gun. We need an undeniable act. We need to catch him in a lie that he cannot explain away." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You said he reloads it. That means the capsule runs out. It degrades." "Yes, Silas said it releases vapor with heat." "So, If you wear it, Miller said, he will eventually have to open it again. He will have to replace the capsule. Or, if he thinks it is not working fast enough, he will have to tamper with it to increase the dose. I felt a cold chill slide down my spine. You want me to wear it? I want you to wear the dummy, Miller said. The one Silas gave you, but I want you to act like it is working. I want you to get sick again. Make him feel confident. Make him feel like the plan is back on track. And then? Then we need to catch him with the poison in his hand, Miller said. Not on a hidden camera 3 days later. In person. With witnesses. We need a sting. I looked out the window at the parking lot. I saw a mother buckling her child into a car seat. Normal life. Safe life. I was being asked to walk back into a cage with a tiger and pretend to be asleep. He thinks I am crazy, I said. He is sending me to a psychiatrist. He thinks he has won. That is your advantage, Miller said. Arrogance makes people sloppy. He is not expecting you to fight back. He is expecting you to fade away. Miller slid a card across the table. I have a team, private investigators, former cops. We can wire your apartment with audio and video that is court-admissible quality. We can stage a confrontation, but you have to be the bait. Mrs. Riley, you are the only one he trusts enough to get close to. I thought about the demand letter. Final notice. I thought about Kelsey. She looks better today. I thought about the baby I had wanted to have with him, the family I had dreamed of. All of it sold for $500,000 and a clean getaway. I looked at Miller. When can you set up the equipment? I asked. I went home that evening. The apartment was quiet. Ethan was in the living room, watching the news. I walked into the bedroom. I opened the jewelry box. The necklace was there, coiled like a snake. The lead weight was inside, harmless and heavy. I picked it up. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from hatred. I walked to the mirror. I lifted the chain. I watched my own reflection as I fastened the clasp behind my neck. The gold settled into the hollow of my throat. It felt cold against my skin. I walked out into the living room. Ethan looked up. His eyes went straight to the pendant. A flicker of relief crossed his face. He smiled. That practiced, perfect smile. You put it back on, he said. Yes, I said, touching the metal. I felt naked without it. I am glad, he said. It really is the most beautiful thing I have ever given you. It is, I agreed. It is the only thing that matters. I sat down next to him. I leaned my head on his shoulder. I let him wrap his arm around me. Enjoy it. Ethan, I thought, enjoy the victory lap. Because he didn't know that the woman in his arms wasn't his wife anymore. She was the evidence, and this time, when the necklace opened, it wasn't going to release a poison. It was going to release the truth. The stage was set by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Detective Miller and his team had been in the apartment since noon. They were efficient, silent men who moved like shadows. They installed microcameras in the crown molding of the dining room, behind the vent in the hallway, and replaced the existing camera in the bedroom with a high-definition unit hardwired to a server in a van parked 3 streets away. The most important preparation, however, happened at the kitchen table. Silas Mercer had come over personally to handle the swap. He wore gloves as he opened the pendant with a specialized tool. He removed the ceramic capsule, the one Ethan had loaded just days ago, and placed it into a sealed evidence bag. This is the lethal dose, Silas said, his voice grim. We keep this safe. Then, he picked up the replacement. It was visually identical to the ceramic bead, same gray color, same porous texture. But it was made of inert compressed chalk and marked with a microscopic UV reactive dot that would glow bright orange under a blacklight. If he touches this, Silas said, placing the dummy inside the gold cavity and snapping the locket shut, he proves he knows how to operate the mechanism, but more importantly, when he realizes it is a dummy because the weight is off by a fraction of a gram, or because he checks the degradation, he will panic, and panic makes people talk. I took the necklace. It felt heavy, not with poison, but with purpose. "Are you ready?" Miller asked me. He was sitting in my armchair, adjusting an earpiece. "Once they walk through that door, you are on your own until we breach. You have to keep them here. You have to make him feel safe enough to make a move." "I am ready," I said. I was not ready. I was terrified. But I was also done being the victim. I sent the text to the group chat I had created for the occasion. Ethan, Diane, and Kelsey. "Peace dinner tonight at 7. I made a roast. I want to apologize for being so difficult lately and thank you all for standing by me. Let's start over." It was the kind of pathetic, groveling message they would expect from a broken woman. Ethan replied instantly, "That sounds wonderful. Babe, we will be there." At 6:55, I put the roast in the oven and put the necklace on. I chose a dress with a low neckline, framing the gold so it was the first thing they would see. I poured myself a glass of sparkling water and waited. The doorbell rang at 7 sharp. Ethan unlocked the door. It was his house, after all, and ushered his family in. He looked the part of the relieved husband, carrying a bouquet of white lilies. Kelsey followed, holding 2 bottles of expensive red wine, looking sharp and hungry. And then there was Diane. Diane Caldwell did not look triumphant. She looked haggard. Her usual impeccable posture was rigid, brittle. She wore a dark suit that looked more appropriate for a funeral than a dinner party. When she saw me, her eyes didn't scan my outfit or critique my hair. They went straight to Ethan, then to me, then back to Ethan. There was fear in her eyes. "June," Ethan said, kissing my cheek. He smelled of cologne and confidence. "You look better. The color is coming back to your cheeks." "I feel better," I lied, smiling at the man who had undoubtedly checked his burner phone in the car to see why I wasn't dead yet. "I think the new medication is working." "That is great news," Kelsey said, kicking off her heels and heading straight for the wine glasses. "Let's toast to that. I need a drink." "Hello, Diane," I said. Diane stood in the entryway, clutching her purse with white-knuckled hands. "June," she said. Her voice was tight. "Thank you for having us." She walked past me, giving Ethan a wide berth, as if he were contagious. We moved to the dining room. I had set the table with the good china, the wedding crystal, the heavy silver. It was a beautiful tableau for a sting operation. Throughout the appetizers, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Ethan was manic, talking too fast, laughing too loud. He kept glancing at the necklace, every time I moved, every time the gold caught the light. His eyes tracked it. He was checking the timer. He was calculating the dosage. Kelsey was doing her job, which was to incapacitate me. "Drink up, June," she said, refilling my glass with a heavy pour of Cabernet. "You have been so uptight for months. You need to relax. It is vintage." "I cannot mix alcohol with the medication," I said, covering the glass with my hand. "Doctor's orders." "1 glass won't kill you," Kelsey sneered, then caught herself. A flicker of panic crossed her face. "I mean, it won't hurt." "No," I said firmly. "I will stick to water." Ethan looked at me, his smile tightening. "Just a sip, babe. It is a celebration." I said no. "Ethan." Diane spoke up suddenly. "Leave her alone. Ethan, if she does not want to drink, she does not have to drink." The table went silent. Ethan looked at his mother. Genuine confusion on his face. This wasn't the script. Diane was supposed to be the bully. "I am just trying to help her relax." "Mom," Ethan said, his voice hard. "She looks relaxed enough," Diane said, taking a sip of her own water. She was watching him with that same fearful intensity I had seen at the door. "She looks surprisingly healthy." "I do," I said, seizing the opening. "Actually, I feel a little too warm. The roast makes the apartment so hot." I fanned myself, letting a look of discomfort pass over my face. "I am going to splash some cold water on my face," I said, standing up. "And I think I will take this off for a minute. It feels heavy tonight." I reached up and unclasped the necklace. Ethan's eyes widened. He half rose from his chair. "Do you want me to put it in the box for you?" he asked, too eager. "No, sit," I said, flashing him a reassuring smile. "I can manage. I will just be a second." I walked out of the dining room, carrying the necklace. I walked down the hallway, past the bathroom, and into the bedroom. I placed the necklace on the dresser, right in the center, exactly where the camera hidden in the bookshelf could see it. I left the jewelry box open. Then, I went into the bathroom, closed the door, and turned on the tap loud enough to be heard. I pulled out my phone. I opened the app connected to the hidden cameras. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and watched the screen. In the dining room, Ethan was drumming his fingers on the table. "I need to use the restroom," he announced. "Sit down, Ethan," Diane snapped. "She is in there." "There is a guest bath." "Mom," he said, standing up. "Relax." He walked out of the dining room. He didn't go to the guest bath. He walked down the hallway. He paused outside the master bedroom door. He listened. The sound of the running water covered his movements. He slipped inside the bedroom. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would crack them. "This is it. Do not look away," on the small screen of my phone. I watched my husband walk to the dresser. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a man checking his watch. He looked efficient. He lifted the necklace. He pulled a pair of gloves from his pocket. Thin, latex gloves that he must have stolen from the kitchen or a supply kit. He slipped them on. He slid the locket open. I held my breath. He stared into the cavity. He froze. He leaned closer, squinting. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small LED pen light. He shone it into the gold shell. He saw the dummy. He saw that the texture was wrong. He saw that the seal was different. He panicked. He frantically tried to pry the dummy capsule out with his fingernail through the glove. "What the?" he muttered. The audio from the bedroom camera was crystal clear. "Where is the—" "Ethan?" The voice came from the bedroom doorway. Ethan spun around, dropping the necklace on the dresser. It wasn't me. It was Diane. She had followed him. She stood in the doorway, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. She wasn't looking at him with maternal affection. She was looking at the gloves. She was looking at the open locket. She was looking at the pen light. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice shaking. "What are you doing?" Ethan scrambled, trying to hide the gloves behind his back. "Nothing. Mom, I was just— June left it out. I was putting it away." "You are wearing gloves," Diane said. She stepped into the room. "Why are you wearing gloves to touch your wife's jewelry?" "I have a cut," he stammered. "On my hand. I didn't want to get blood on it." "Liar," Diane hissed. She walked toward him. "I knew it. I knew something was wrong. You asked me about the storage unit. You asked me about the old chemicals. I thought you were just selling things for drug money again. But this—" She looked at the necklace. "What did you do to it?" she demanded. "Mom, shut up," Ethan snapped, his face twisting into something ugly. "Go back to dinner." "Is that why she is sick?" Diane asked, her voice rising to a shriek. "Did you do something to her? Ethan, answer me." "She is setting me up!" Kelsey burst into the room, wineglass still in hand, swaying slightly. She looked from Ethan to Diane to the necklace. "Do not say anything. Ethan," Kelsey yelled. "She is recording this. I told you. She is trying to frame us." She lunged toward the dresser, trying to grab the necklace. "Don't touch it!" Ethan screamed, shoving his sister back. "Police!" The front door crashed open. The sound of heavy boots thundered down the hallway. "Police! Nobody move! Hands where I can see them!" Detective Miller and 3 uniformed officers poured into the bedroom, guns drawn but lowered. The room instantly became too small, filled with shouting and the smell of adrenaline. "Step away from the dresser!" Miller shouted. "Now!" Ethan threw his hands up. The gloves were still on. He looked wild, cornered, a rat caught in a spotlight. "I didn't do it!" Ethan screamed, backing against the wall. He pointed a shaking finger at the doorway where Diane stood frozen. It was her. It was my mother. She hates her. She told me to do it. The silence that followed was absolute. I walked out of the bathroom then. I stood in the hallway, watching them. Diane slowly turned her head to look at her son. The look on her face wasn't anger. It was total devastation. It was the look of a woman watching her entire world dissolve into ash. "Me?" Diane whispered. "She bought the necklace!" Ethan shouted, sweating profusely. "She gave me the chemical. It is from her storage unit. She has been trying to get rid of June for years. I was just trying to stop her." "You coward," Kelsey muttered, backing away from him. "Check the bank accounts," Ethan yelled at Miller. "Check her texts. She is the one with the motive." Diane straightened her spine. The fear evaporated, replaced by the icy, imperious armor I knew so well. She reached into her handbag. "Ma'am, keep your hands visible," an officer shouted. "I am getting my phone," Diane said calmly, "and my files." She pulled out a folded stack of papers and dropped them on the dresser, right next to the poisoned necklace. "I expected you to steal from me, Ethan," Diane said, her voice cold and steady. "I expected you to lie. I even expected you to try to leverage the inheritance early, but I did not expect you to be this stupid." She looked at Miller. "I have been tracking his finances for 5 years," she said. "Since he went to rehab the first time, I pay his mortgage, I pay his car note. And I have been paying the interest on the loan shark debt he racked up with Granite Harbor Development." Ethan's face went white. "He asked me for $50,000 last week," Diane continued, gesturing to the papers. "He said it was for medical bills for June, but I called the hospital. There were no bills. I knew he was desperate. I knew he was dangerous. That is why I texted June every day. I was checking to see if she was still alive." She turned to me. Her eyes were not kind, but they were honest. "I did not like you, June," she said. "I thought you were common. I thought you were boring. But I never wanted you dead. I just wanted you divorced." She pointed a manicured finger at Ethan. "He is the one who increased the life insurance," she said. "And he is the one who forged my signature on the trust documents to try and hide the payout. It is all there, the transfers, the dates, the emails he thought he deleted." Ethan slumped against the wall, the fight draining out of him. He looked at the necklace, then at me. "It was just a business decision," he whispered, as if that explained everything. "It was just math. June, you were worth more dead than alive. Anyone could see that." I stepped into the room. I looked at the man I had married. I looked at the hands that had held me, the hands now covered in latex and guilt. The math was wrong. "Ethan," I said softly. Miller stepped forward, handcuffs clicking at his belt. "Ethan Caldwell," he said, "you are under arrest for the attempted murder of June Riley." As they cuffed him, Ethan didn't look at me. He looked at his mother. "You ruined everything," he spat at her. "No, Ethan," Diane said, turning away, tears finally spilling down her frozen cheeks. "I just stopped paying for it." The machinery of justice, I discovered, is not emotional. It is grindingly, beautifully mechanical. In the days following the arrest, the police forensic team took my apartment apart. They did not find a ghost. They did not find a hysterical woman's paranoia. They found fingerprints. Ethan's right thumbprint was lifted clearly from the inner curve of the gold locket, preserved by the very oil he had used to lubricate the sliding mechanism. The ceramic capsule we recovered from the scene, the dummy Silas had planted, was clean, but the original capsule, the one Silas had extracted earlier, was a biological match. It held traces of Ethan's DNA mixed with the residue of the synthetic dimethylmercury compound. The digital trail was even more damning. It took the cybercrimes unit 3 days to break the encryption on the laptop Ethan kept in his office. When they did, they found a search history that read like a manual for slow-motion murder. How to mimic autoimmune disease symptoms, absorption rates of heavy metals through dermis, solubility of ceramic in high heat. He had not just bought a weapon, he had studied it. He had treated my death like a continuing education credit for a job he desperately wanted to quit. Kelsey cracked first. They charged her with conspiracy to commit murder and insurance fraud, faced with a 20-year sentence in a federal prison where she could not get Chardonnay or manicures. She turned on her brother with breathtaking speed. Her confession laid out the financial rot at the center of the Caldwell family. She and Ethan were not just siblings. They were codependents in a collapsing economy of their own making. They had leveraged their inheritances, taken out loans against trusts that did not fully vest for another 10 years, and funneled it all into high-risk schemes that evaporated. If Ethan went bankrupt, Kelsey would be exposed as a guarantor. They were two drowning swimmers clutching each other, and they decided the only way to float was to stand on my corpse. The quiet exit was their term for it. I saw it in the transcript of her interrogation. Ethan said it would be peaceful. Kelsey had told the detectives. He said she would just get tired and go to sleep. We did not think it was violent. We just needed the policy to pay out before the fiscal quarter ended. They spoke about killing me the way one speaks about liquidating an underperforming asset. But the piece of the puzzle that truly rearranged my understanding of the last 3 months was Diane. I sat across from her in a sterile conference room at the district attorney's office 2 weeks before the trial. She looked smaller. The armor of the imperious matriarch was gone, replaced by a weary, aging woman in a gray suit. "I need you to know something," she said, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. "I did not know it was poison. I swear to you." "I believe you," I said, and I did. Her reaction in the bedroom had been too raw to be faked. "But I knew he was doing something," she admitted, looking down at her hands. "I saw him with the necklace at Christmas. He was fiddling with the catch. He looked obsessive. And when I saw how sick you were getting, and how he refused to let you see any doctor other than the ones he picked, I got scared." She took a deep breath. "I called Silas Mercer 3 weeks ago," she said. I froze. "You called him?" "I asked him if that specific piece had any history of modification," Diane said. "I asked him if it could be opened. I thought maybe Ethan was smuggling something. Diamonds, drugs. I did not know. Silas told me he could not discuss a client's potential property, but he asked me why I was asking. I told him my daughter-in-law was wearing it and she was fading away." I stared at her. Silas hadn't just found me on the train by chance. He had been looking for me. He had been looking for me because the woman I thought hated me had sounded the alarm. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Because I did not trust you," Diane said, her eyes meeting mine with a brutal honesty. "I thought you were weak. I thought if I told you, you would run to him and he would talk his way out of it. Ethan has always been a liar. June. But he is my son. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to prove he was innocent before I accused him." "You were protecting the name," I said. "I was," she conceded. "And I was protecting him until I couldn't anymore." It wasn't an apology of affection. It was an admission of reality. Diane was not a villain, but she was not a hero. She was a woman who had realized too late that the monster in her house was the one she had raised. The trial was short. Ethan's defense attorney tried the distraught husband angle. He put Ethan on the stand, dressed in a soft blue sweater, looking pale and sympathetic. Ethan cried. He wept real tears, talking about the pressure of his job, the confusion of his finances, how he had been manipulated by his addiction to gambling and his fear of disappointing his mother. He tried to blame Diane. He claimed she was the one who bought the chemical. He claimed he was just a terrified son following orders. It was a good performance. The jury looked moved. Then, my lawyer played the video. The courtroom screens flickered to life. There was the bedroom. There was the dresser. There was Ethan, alone, calm, efficient. The jury watched him put on the gloves. They watched him open the locket. They watched the steady, practiced hand of a man loading a weapon. But it was the smile that ended him, that small, tight smile of satisfaction as he snapped the locket shut. It wasn't the face of a coerced victim. It wasn't the face of a panicked son. It was the face of a man who thought he had just gotten away with it. When the video ended, the silence in the room was heavy enough to crush bone. I took the stand for the victim impact statement. I did not scream. I did not cry. I looked directly at Ethan, who was staring at the table, unable to meet my eyes. "You spent 3 years making me doubt my own mind," I said into the microphone. "You told me I was anxious. You told me I was sick. You told me I needed your protection. You made me carry my own death around my neck and called it a gift." I paused, letting the words settle. "You called it love," I said, "but love does not require me to disappear." The gavel came down 2 hours later. Ethan was sentenced to 25 years without the possibility of parole. Kelsey took a plea deal for 15. I divorced him the following week. It was a simple administrative proceeding. No assets to split. They were all seized by creditors. No custody battle. Just a signature on a piece of paper that legally severed me from the man who had tried to erase me. I met Diane one last time to sign the final papers regarding the apartment, which was in a trust she controlled. She stood in the empty living room, looking at the place where her son had destroyed his life. "I am sorry." "June," she said. It was plain. It was unadorned. "I am sorry I did not see it sooner, and I am sorry I treated you like a stranger." I looked at her. I didn't feel the need to hug her. I didn't feel the need to forgive her instantly. Forgiveness is a process, and I was just starting to heal. "Thank you, Diane," I said. "Take care of yourself." I walked out of the door and left the key on the counter. I didn't look back. 6 months later, the morning air in D.C. was crisp, smelling of autumn leaves and rain. I walked down the escalator into the metro station. Joining the rush hour crowd, I didn't feel the old panic. I didn't feel the phantom nausea rising in my throat. My body was my own again. I had gained back the weight I lost. My hair was thick and shiny. My skin had color. I stood on the platform, waiting for the red line. When the train arrived, I stepped on. I grabbed the silver pole. The car was crowded, bodies pressing close. But I didn't flinch. A woman standing next to me was reading a book. A man was listening to music. I caught my reflection in the dark window of the tunnel as the train sped up. I looked strong. I reached up and touched my throat. There was no heavy gold locket there, no secret mechanism, no hidden poison. Instead, there was a simple, thin silver chain with a small pendant I had bought for myself at a craft fair in Georgetown. It was just a piece of hammered silver. Shaped like a small, imperfect circle, it meant nothing. It held nothing. And that was why it was beautiful. I watched the lights of the tunnel blur past, a streak of motion in the dark. I wasn't June the victim anymore. I wasn't June the wife. I was just June. Survival isn't luck. I realized as the train emerged into the daylight of the elevated track. Survival isn't just about dodging the bullet or finding the antidote. Survival is the moment you finally stop protecting the thing that is killing you. I let go of the pole, found my balance, and stood on my own 2 feet as the train carried me forward into a future that was entirely, wonderfully mine. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below and share your thoughts on June's journey. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel Jane Revenge Stories, like the video, and smash that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.